7:05 p.m. I will call the Hamilton Board of Select Board meeting to order for July 18th. We start with our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, in liberty and justice for all. All right, we have several announcements and a good amount of board openings. We have the Historic District Commission, 2 openings, one for a Board of Realtor and an at-large member. Our Conservation Commission has 2 openings. Hamilton Housing Authority has 1 opening. Human Rights Commission has 2 openings, one for a Housing Authority member and 1 at-large member. At this point, we have time for public comment for anything not already on the agenda. If there's anybody on Zoom who wishes to speak at this point or any point during the meeting, please raise your hand. And anybody in the house can just move up to the microphone. All right, seeing no comment, we'll move on to Select Board member and Town Manager reports. Bill, you want to start on the end there if you got anything to add? All right. Caroline?
Nothing for me.
Tom?
Yeah, just a couple updates. So there was a very healthy debate in the planning board meeting last week around the 133 tobacco. The applicants were submitting their final submissions, and there'll be a meeting in 2 weeks for closing statements. So just recommend that people check that out. And then as far as the Conservation Commission, they're still working on their updated bylaw, looking for feedback from the public. So they do have their draft bylaw on the website. So definitely take a peek at that. If you can, feel free to follow up with the Conservation Commission and get some feedback to them. So they're doing a lot of great work over there. So appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Tom. Jamie, anything from you?
Not tonight.
And I will abstain tonight because we've got a pretty full agenda. Joe, anything to add?
I was away for the last 2 weeks and do not have anything to report.
All right. We have with us Chief Ray Burnett to give us a department head report on our awesome fire department.
I haven't done this in a while, but good evening. I'm happy to be here and see some happy faces, and glad that we're not all masked up and whatnot. As Sean said, my name's Ray Burnett. I'm the fire chief here, and I'm going to give you a report. I'm also going to give you a little background information as I have gone to residents' homes and emergencies and whatnot, especially new residents. They have no idea what we have for services in the town. You know, why I might have got up, might be in my PJs, get in my truck, go to the call, throw my jacket on, but they see that I got slippers on, and they have no idea why I'm showing up in this way. So that's why I'm going to give us a little bit of background information that some people might hear on Zoom that they don't know. And with that, most of the people don't realize, but we have a combination department. It's made up of full-time firefighters and call firefighters. Currently, our staff consists of 5 full-time firefighters and 27 on-call firefighters. Our full-time staff works actually Monday through Friday, consistent schedule, 7 a.m. till 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And then once their shift is over, they go home, and they also respond to emergency calls when they are available, weekends and nights. Our paid on-call staff, actually, they're part-time. They have no set schedule, and they respond for the bulk of the calls, seeing how we have 27 members on the department, and they respond from their homes, from work, wherever they can, whenever they can, to serve the town of Hamilton and the town of Hamilton's residents, and it's a noble service. Over the past 32 years, I've actually watched this whole system develop, evolve per se. It's not the perfect system. It's very economical. As Alex, I see him on the Zoom meeting, will attest to. It's very economical, but it works. However, with that said, the biggest problem that I have is retention, recruitment and retention of call firefighters. And over the past, well, since I was appointed in 2018, I've hired 20 call firefighters to join the fire department. We've lost a few here and there, but I continue to do that. Now, if you do the math, that's about 2/3 of the department in the past 4 years. If you think about that, you know, where else do you see that type of turnover? The reason why we had some of this, more wasn't really turnover. We had some people that weren't showing up dead weight, and we had to ask them to move on. And we've actually found some personnel that are excited to do this job. Caroline and Tom they were out on training exercise that we do monthly, and they saw the enthusiastic personnel that we have. So with that said, each and every firefighter goes through a rigorous training process where they have to become certified firefighters 1, 2, and FPA certified. Along with that, the commitment doesn't stop there. They have to actually go to training once a month, and there's actually additional training above and beyond that to keep their skills up. So there is a lot of commitment that this takes. So you can imagine the time frames it puts on all our personnel to do that. When we hire these new call firefighters, we send them to the Massachusetts Call Volunteer class. That's actually, I'm proud to say that we've actually sponsored it for the last 4 years. It's actually been in the town of Hamilton, and which has made it much easier for our recruits to go to the class. And they've gotten a lot out of it. They become certified. Once they become certified, I get them to go get their EMT. Most of our other firefighters are EMTs. And that's how the department runs. Out of the 32 members on the department, we have 6 officers. They're instrumental in the command staff structure of the fire department, and I couldn't do it without them. So me being the chief, I have a captain and 4 lieutenants, and through delegation of authority, if we have an emergency call, they will instruct anywhere from 4 to 7 firefighters per officer what to do. As you know, we serve the town in many different ways: structure fires, car fires, motor vehicle accidents, ice, water rescue, search and rescue, and yes, even through the pandemic, we actually did a lot. Our staff went and got certified to give vaccinations. We ran the clinics with Rachel Lee. I think that our department went over and above and did an excellent job. And hopefully we're past that now. So last year, we responded to over 1,400 calls, and believe it or not, more than half of them now are medical calls, mutual aids, not mutual aids, sorry, medical aids we call them, where we actually do patient care on an injured party until our ambulance service provider can come and transport that patient to the hospital. For the most part, we roll simultaneously, but occasionally they're elsewhere. They're a non-dedicated bus or ambulance, we call it. Slang word, we call it a bus. They might be elsewhere, and they respond from where they are. Apparatus. Our apparatus is vital. Our apparatus and equipment is vital to the department. It is well maintained. We have a excellent mechanic. He's a part-time mechanic. His name's Jay Frontero. He used to be on the Gloucester Fire Department, was a mechanic there. He works 1 to 2 days a week, keeps our equipment repaired in great shape. I don't know how many people know how many pieces of apparatus we have. We have 3 engines, a ladder, a rescue, brush truck, and there's 3 other utility vehicles that we also have. Everything is pretty much in great shape. Currently we have our brush, it's called 505. It's actually in Canada. It's having the body built. We procured it last September. It was a lease purchase. Because of the pandemic, things got delayed. It finally went to Canada to have the body and the pump put on, and I expect that back sometime, hopefully by the end of August or beginning of September. So the next truck that's scheduled to be replaced is engine 3. We have that on the docket. It actually got moved to FY26. However, I have got some bad news that manufacturing process is out over 24 months. So our schedule is FY26 to actually purchase and buy this. With 24 months, the lead time is actually FY24 that we have to consider it, and hopefully we can get the price held at the 24. The good news, we can hopefully get it held at the 24 price and get it delivered at 26. Who was it? It was Gloucester just did the same thing. They ordered probably 5 months ago, and back then it was scheduled to be 18 months out. They ordered 2 engines and an ambulance, and they were scheduled to arrive 18 months later. So that's something that I'm going to bring in front of the Capcom committee and push hard on. I know Joe doesn't probably want to hear that, but let me see. Ongoing projects. Last month I started to update the comprehensive emergency plan with my MEMA rep. They call it a SET plan. This goes over all the hazards, the natural hazards and man-made hazards that the town of Hamilton might incur, and we need to plan for. We already have a plan in place, but it's basically a big upgrade to what we have now, and we started that just before I went on vacation last week. Once again, we're going to be applying for a federal grant for $16,000 for PPE. Last year we were awarded the same grant and got $15,500. We're also planning for another federal grant I'm going to try and go for a rescue. That's about $350,000 to see if we can get that. I heard there's a great opportunity to that they will give it to fire departments. So I'm going to try that. It doesn't hurt. If you don't ask, you don't get it. What else? Continuing on running the fire recruit program, and we also have the fire academy running the class again. We also have, I've also petitioned the fire academy, and we have a fire officer and a fire instructor class coming to this area, and it's going to be taught at the senior center. We're going to do the instructor class first in the fall, and then next spring we're going to be doing the officer class, and it gives our personnel the opportunity to become certified fire officers and fire instructors, and I think that's a great opportunity for advancement in the fire service here in Hamilton. What else? That's all I had. You guys have any questions for me?
Questions for Chief? Comments?
A lot of good information. Thank you.
Yeah. I think the fire department is actually, it's come leaps and bounds in the last 4 years. We built the staff back up. We have people showing up, some enthusiastic new firefighters. Unfortunately, the ones that seem to be more enthusiastic and train hard are the ones that are looking to go to a full-time department elsewhere in the future. And you can't wrong them for that. That's their prerogative. And as long as we get something back from them for their training, which I would say all of them have actually put a lot of effort towards the fire department showing up. It's well worth it. Even if we get 2-3 years out of them, and we have one of our firefighters actually got a job in Beverly. He still takes shifts on the weekends and comes to call. We have another guy that got a job in North Reading and actually lives in Wenham, and he's still showing up. So for the most part, it's working. And like I said before, the call department, with the full-time department, it's the backbone. These people have to respond, all hours of the day and night. on the weekends, holidays. And I feel that it's working for now. We'll have to see what happens in the future, though.
You said, Chief, that we got a grant or we're applying for a grant for the SCBA. I know we
Not
got one already.
SCBA's. We bought equipment 1 year, and we really was supposed to have 2 sets of fire gear for each firefighter. And we
turnout
don't-
gear you're talking
Yeah,
about,
turnout
yeah.
gear, because if you have a fire and you have to wash it, then that person is without a second set. We tried once for which Gloucester got was a whole second set of gear for the department, which is
That's huge.
like $95,000 to
Yeah.
$100,000. And we tried for that, and, I'm gonna put in for that again, but these grants are so competitive, as everybody knows, and, you can only do your best, and, you're rolling the dice, and hopefully, we got a grant for, between us, Raleigh and Boxford for radios that was about $750,000. The day I went to pick them up and have them engraved, I had, almost $1 million in the back of the truck. It's a lot of money.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions?
I would just say we had such a delightful time when we came. And I would encourage anyone who hasn't been to see what goes on. It's the second Tuesday of the month.
It's the second Tuesday of the month is our normal drill, and we usually have something, something very unique was the
We cut a car in half,
Yeah.
y'all.
We did.
vehicle extrication, and we actually had, we hired 3 new recruits for this coming class, and so we were doing a kind of a dual drill, and we had the recruits doing search and rescue in the stairwell of the hose tower, and Caroline and Tom put on full gear. I got to give it to them. They didn't seem claustrophobic. They went up and down the hose tower and had a blast. And I as Caroline said, I would encourage anybody to come see what we do. We can put you in gear, have you train, maybe even make one of you a future firefighter.
Yeah. To admit, we looked stoic, but I think we were both having mini panic attacks.
Well, I definitely like the white helmet. I think she's a future officer.
And I also just think, just the level of knowledge that we gained walking through the different vehicles that were there and the protocols, I think that it was an amazing experience all around, and we're grateful to you guys for letting us do it and make fools of ourselves. That was not what happened, but it was great.
People don't realize how much is involved, how many different skills. It's just not out, putting out fires and brush fires. There is a lot more to it. There really is. So.
Did you say you're doing the Citizens Fire Academy again this year?
We have not done the Citizen Fire Academy for quite some time. Russ had wanted to do the Police Academy, and the interest just hasn't been there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's because of what's happened in the past 2 years, but I'm willing to, if anybody wants to come out, and try it and see if it's something they're interested in before they make a commitment, or just to check it out to see what we do. We're more than happy to have anybody come down and schedule something, and we can do something with them, especially, during training night.
Yeah.
Okay?
All right.
Just since we were talking about all the training that our fire department goes through, I think that Ray might have forgot to mention that we had a big rescue last week out on Chewbacca Road.
Yeah, we had a motor vehicle accident where our vehicle extrication training came into play. We had a pickup truck that went over a knoll and went airbound and hit the tree about 5 to 6 feet up. Did significant damage to the vehicle, and we had to extricate the person out of the truck. Along with that, we had one of them come in and do a med flight. So things happen in a sleepy little town like Hamilton,
Right.
and people don't realize. A lot of people don't listen to the scanners anymore, but it really truly happens. So.
All right. Anything else? Thank you very much, Chief.
Thanks,
Well,
Chief.
thank you. I'm glad to teach you guys and explain to you how the department runs, and I'm happy to do it anytime. Okay.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Too.
All right, moving on to our consent agenda. We have approved minutes of May 2nd and May 16th, 2022 Select Board meetings, and approve a donation of office equipment to the Senior Center. Anybody want to make a motion?
Move that we approve the consent agenda.
All right, second?
Second.
Anybody? All right, second by Tom. Any discussion? Nope. All right, all those in favor? Say aye. Aye, unanimous. Motion passes. All right. One more thing before we really get rolling here. We have appoint, and I believe it's Deb Thompson, to fill the vacancy on the Conservation Commission. Discuss and vote. This application was in the packets, right?
The application was sent out in the amended packets. We have an applicant, we have a need to have a member on that committee because they can't meet quorum right
Yeah.
now. And the chair and the conservation agent met with the applicant, and the chair has issued a letter of recommendation to the select board. We hope you'll consider it.
Yep, and I spoke with the chair over the weekend, and a very qualified applicant, and I believe they're out of the country at the moment, so they're not here to meet us, but qualified for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Anybody want to make a motion in a second, and et cetera?
I'll make a motion to appoint Deborah Thompson to the Conservation Commission.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Have it? All right, so we have kind of, the agenda says we kind of have two joint meetings here, but I thought for best kind of discussion and everyone to be involved, we'll open kind of the other two meetings at the same time, and we can have CPC and FinCom and the Board of Selectmen all kind of have a nice mashup with all the information we've got in front of us for these items. So if you want to open your meeting.
All right, this is Christina Schenk-Hargrove, the Chair of the Hamilton Finance and Advisory Committee. I'll open our meeting. It is 7:27 PM. I have some members
You need roll
in,
call vote.
in person and some remotely. So, John?
John McGrath is present.
And remotely, we have John Prulidge,
John Perlich, present.
David Wanger,
Dave Wanger, present.
and Harry Phillip.
Harry Phillip, present.
All right, we are open.
yours.
This is Jay Butler, Chair of the Community Preservation Committee. It's 7:28, and I'll do a roll call of the CPC. I'm here, Robert Preston, Sean Farrell,
Here.
Kim Dito,
Here.
Kirsten Bridier, Rick Johansson, Michelle Hogan,
Here.
Sandy Cotting,
Here.
Richard Boroff.
Here.
Very good. We have a quorum of the CPC.
All right, so up first, we have the annual report of the CPC, and then discussion about possible STM articles, discussion about town hall extension, and very similar topics on the finance committee. So Jay, if you want to start out doing the presentation, I think Joe's going to bring it up for the Zoom folks. And go for it.
Yeah, this presentation that I put together with much help from Lori Wilson, it's part tutorial, part historical, part current in terms of numbers. It has some future, what we see looking out in the future, has a lot of information in it. I'd advise you not to try to take notes. There's too much in here, but we'll send everybody from the FinCom, Select Board, and the CPC a PDF copy after this meeting, and we'll post it on the CPC webpage as well, so you can refer to it. I just chatted with Sean a few minutes ago. I think it might be better to hold any questions you have till I get done, because chances are I'm going to answer your questions 2 slides ahead, so why don't we just proceed? The first slide just lists the CPC committee. Laurie Wilson is our coordinator. We have a full committee for the first time in a while. We've been running a little short of the prescribed 9 members, but we now have 9 members, as you see there. Recently leaving the committee was Sherry Leonard from the Housing Authority, and Michelle Hogan has taken her place. We go next. A little history. The CPA law the act was signed in 2000 by Governor Paul Cellucci. In town here, it was championed by Gretel and Peter Clark, and it was adopted in May 2005 with a 2% surcharge after failing the year before for a 3% surcharge. Right now, 189 of 351 mass communities participate, and 75 of them are having the maximum 3% surcharge, with 10 new communities in the process of adopting. The communities that try and adopt the CPA choose from a 1 to a 3% surcharge on their property taxes, which is billed quarterly with the property tax bill. The CPA Trust Fund, which has all the money for the state match, is managed by the Mass Department of Revenue, and they set the state match and distribute the funds typically in November of the year. And the money, the CPA Trust Fund monies, come from the 21 Registry of Deeds offices via the property transaction fees and any potential year-end state budget surplus voted by the Mass Legislature. In 2021, you can see our 2% surcharge revenue and then a 29% state match for a total of $631,000. FY22, it was much better. You can see the surcharge. We had a 43.8% state match for a total of $739,000 and something for monies. There's a note here that in May, the Mass Senate approved an amendment that could add $20 million to the pool of state funds. This afternoon, it was passed 3 or 4 hours ago that the $20 million has been approved by the Mass House and Senate. And this should push the state match over 40% for the coming year. So that's good news. And just a comment that Senator Bruce Tarr has been a big proponent of this stuff for many years. The next, please. This is a little history of what the CPA Trust Fund has done in the number of years. You can see how the number of communities participating in the CPA has increased, and you can see the state match. And the interesting thing about the state match is you can see there's 5 years there where the legislature approved a state surplus amount to sort of buoy the amount of money that we get. And so it's coming back. I mean, a lot of people were a little dismayed by when we went into the 20% numbers. Now we're in the 43.8 last year, and it looks like maybe over 40 next year. So things are looking up. In terms of Essex County, just as you can see the towns that don't participate in the CPA, and you can see the 1%ers, 1.5%, 2%, Hamilton, and then 3% in our kinship Wenham, just to show this. So there's a great number of communities in the county that don't participate at all. You can go to the next one. Since the tax rate is closely aligned with the surcharge, I just wanted to show you that in Essex County, Wenham is the highest in terms of tax rate. We're second, Amesbury is third, and you can see their commitment to the CPA. The lowest in the county is Newbury, followed by Nahat and Rockport. And then finally in the state, Longmeadow is the highest in the state at $24.64. The lowest is Chilmark, and the median tax rate in the state is $14.58.
Jay, excuse me, where is Chilmark?
Down, the islands, down in the Cape, off the Cape.
Okay.
This is the history of the CPA surcharge and state match histories, if you will. And it just shows from FY06 what the local surcharge revenues all the way up to FY22. And it shows that in terms of surcharges, it's $6.5 million, state match $2.3 million, for a total of $8.8 million in total revenue in our history of participation. Wenham, since they were at 3% surcharge, do a little better. They got to 43.8% last year. But the thing about the towns who will adopt the 3%, they get an additional rounds of funding and a fixed amount that's determined each year. And so their total revenue last year was $809,000, and this was about 99 grand more than Hamilton with 2%. What would happen if CPA revenue in Hamilton had 3% surcharge? I bring this up every year because there is an opportunity if we ever decided to go that way. And I just recalculated what Hamilton would have received in revenues at 3% surcharge, and it was 1.2 million essentially, and it was about 487,000 more than we get with a 2%. A comment about the communities that do have the 3% surcharge, the DUR analyzes population and property taxes, and they develop a equalized property valuation system, and so they categorize all 351 communities in the state into 10 deciles based on this EPVs. The idea that communities with the lowest EPV are in the top deciles and get more money, and the amount of money they get through these extra rounds of you is established annually based on the decile, and it's a fixed amount, it's not a percentage. Go next. Communities in the 4th decile, just to give you, that's where Wenham is. And you can see the towns that participate in CPA that also are in the same decile. Next slide, please. We're in the 7th decile, and you can see the communities that are in the same decile we are, and some of them is kind of strange in my view, but that's the way it is. I tried to figure out this calculation several years ago, and even talking to the Department of Revenue, and I went back to the Community Preservation Office in Boston explaining my frustration, and I was told, "Welcome to my world." So I gave up. What would be the increased cost to the average property if Hamilton had a 3% surcharge last year? The average value of property, $632,000. Property taxes at $1,788,000 is $11,003. The 2% surcharge is $190. The 3% surcharge is $285. So it's a $95 increase, or $24 a quarter, which is how it's billed. It's not a big number compared to the amount of revenue you get. Next slide. I did a calculation here where I looked at the property assessed valuation in the first column, calculated the property tax, and calculated the 2% and the 3% surcharge, and looked at the increase from 2% to 3%. And you can see, it's still not a big number, even when you get up to 1.5 million. And just as a note, the calculation that you get the annual CPA surcharge is you take the assessed value, subtract the first $100,000 valuation, multiply it times the tax rate, and then take 2% of that, and that's how you get these numbers. Next. There are some exemptions. Everybody gets the first $100,000 valuation of property as an exemption. Taxpayers who are over 65 receive the annual elderly 41D exemption from the state, which is determined by residency and income. They get a full boat exemption. And then in Hamilton, there is exemptions for seniors 60 plus and low-income non-senior families. Again, full CPA exemption based on income limits, and the numbers show. Next slide. So it just said.
Yes, question? The senior exemption, is that automatic, or do you have to ask for it?
You have to apply through the assessor's office. The property owned by low-income non-senior, you can see the annual income limits depending on the 1 to 4, and it goes up to 8-person household in some cases. And again, property owned by somebody who's at least one of the persons living there is 60 plus. These are the income limits. And again, the assessor's office has the forms for filling out to apply for any of this. In terms of grants, CPA grants, there's 3 categories: historic preservation, community housing, open space, and recreation. And recreation includes passive recreation as well. The big problem that we deal with on a fairly recent basis is eligibility determination of projects. We have a 2-step process. You apply for eligibility that we discuss and vote on, and then you come back and ask for the funding, and we debate and vote on that. We routinely solicit advice from the Community Preservation Coalition, their executive director, Stuart Saginaw, and town council, KP Law, Tom McEnany. The interesting thing is those 2 sources are often at odds with one another. We tend to side with town council, but an example of how this works, recently, this past town meeting, both CPCs voted and town meeting approved money for the Centennial Park in front of the community house. We went with open space and passive recreation, and Wenham went with historic preservation. and they're both right. Next. The Coalition, which is an organization we belong to, it's a nonprofit that all the communities who adopt a CPA belong, formed in 1990 to help passage of the law itself. We pay annual dues, and there are reporting requirements. They keep data on all CPA adoptions, all approved grants, and information on all CPCs statewide. It's an open database, so you can figure out what anybody else is doing, if similar grants were given, etc. They help communities with understanding, adoption, implementation, and they advocate for the CPT at the state level. There's a number of support organizations that formally support it, and you can see them listed there: the Trust for Public Lands, Mass Audubon, Citizen Housing and Planning Alliance, Mass Affordable Housing Alliance, Preservation Mass, and the trustees. This is a chart that the Community Preservation Coalition developed about how do you choose whether it's open space, historic recreation, housing, and whether you can acquire, create, preserve, support, etc. And this is a quick guide as to whether it qualifies or not. Clearly, under historic, you can't create historic stuff, so that's a given. But some of the other ones that's why we have to lean in on town council and the coalition to help us out, because this is a law, and I think we all realize you take two good lawyers, they can take either side and do very well. That's the problem. So we use this as a quick check, but then we often reach out for advice. Where are we right now? Diane Katz manages our reserve account for us. And we have, you can see the money, open space and rec, we have $65,000 for next year. Community housing, historical preservation, unreserved means it's open-ended, with the total available being 1.2. We have one open grant from previous year, 75K, and I'll mention that in a minute. We're required to keep these type of accounts according to the statute. So right now, we have about 1.2 million in our reserves for grants. Just to comment on our investments, the CPA reserves are kept in a separate account from all other town monies. And the town treasurer collector, Peggy McLaughlin, manages that. This past year, she put us in this Mass Municipal Depository Trust program. And the previous year, we made $1 in interest in our accounts because we couldn't keep the money stable, and we were probably not in the right account, and she moved us into this account here, and I think we made $1,500 to $1,600 in less than 6 months. So great job by her to do that for us. There's an accounting requirement. I bring this up because I get asked about this all the time. The finance department is required to set up an accounting system that has at least 5 buckets of CPA reserve funds. One's historic, one's open space and rec, one's community housing, unreserved, and administration expenses. And each year, we have to look at the total revenues we get from our surcharge revenue and the state match, and we have to put 10% of the total into each of the historic, community housing, and open space and rec into each one, and the rest of the money goes into unreserved. And then we also put 5% in administrative for salaries and advertising, dues, and stuff. We do this by warrant articles at the town meeting. So at the town meeting, there's a flurry of these little internal accounting transfers that town meeting must vote on. It's because of the statute that requires these accounting provisions. And then just a note at the bottom, if we happen to give a grant in a given year in one of the categories, or we make a bond repayment, you don't have to do the 10% for that category. But this is a brief explanation of what those flurry of those warrant articles that appear at the annual town meeting. We can bond. We can ask to bond on large programs like Town Hall. But there's some rules. The repayment premiums for bonds can only be paid from the surcharge revenues and not state match. Those are limits. So depending on what our annual surcharge revenues, that's how much is available to pay for bonds. So you can't just bond infinitum. The first full-year repayment of a bond must be established as affordable. It turns out in municipal bonding that I've learned in the last several years, the first year is pretty much just interest. It's the second year that you get both interest and principal. So you look at the proposed second-year bond repayment to make sure you have enough money coming in each year and your surcharge revenues. Approval at town meeting must be by 2/3 vote, and you don't have to go to the polls. It's strictly a town meeting decision. And the CPC must remain in existence until all the bond repayments have been made. Otherwise, the bonds become the responsibility of the town. Outstanding bonds. We've got a couple. Sagamore Hill, the premium last year was $107,000. This bond matures in 2032. It came from a 2015 grant, which was for a $1.25 million bond for 15 years, plus we put $500,000 in cash as well. Then we have the Town Hill Renovation, Addition, and Preservation Project, two different grants totaling $4 million, with the first full-year premium for a $4 million 5% 30-year municipal bond at $333,000. When these grants were approved the end of 2020 and middle of 2021, the bond repayment rate was 3.25%. We've been advised by our treasurer that we should be looking at 5% right now. So this bumped up the projected bond repayment quite well. This bond here for Town Hall will be enacted if we get the 2/3 vote approval on the construction funding at town meeting, that it is again approved at the polls by simple majority, and construction starts prior to November 15th. And just a comment that the CPC would consider extending this. And this is the next article on the business anyway, so we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Future bonding capability. The estimated funds in FY23 annual for bonds would be $493,000 roughly, less $107,000 or less, slightly less for Sagamore Hill, less $333,000 for Town Hall. So the remaining funds of our annual reserves for bonds is $53,000. So with both of these bonds moving, there's not much room for a large bonding of anything. Go next. Grants. We've got one grant still lingering from FY21. This was approved at town meeting through the First Congregational Church. This has been held up due to the historic preservation restriction agreement that had to be worked and reworked between the Select Board and the Historic District Commission, and most recently by the Mass Historic Commission. That took a year, I think, to get it approved, and they only recently approved it in May of this year. So hopefully, I guess now they're looking at starting the beginning of next summer to do the work. They expected to have it done this year. In FY22, we recently approved the Community House grant for Centennial Square, and to the Record Department, I guess DPW, for open space and recreation for $30,000 for the Patton Park Master Plan. Looking ahead for grants of next year, we foresee one from the school department for the open space and recreation, and we think it will be in the order of $500,000 for the middle school, high school athletic facilities improvement project. We have this is our method of keeping track of potential grants, future anticipated potential grants. This suggestion came from the Select Board several years ago that we maintain something like this, so we developed this system of category grants, future grants, and quite frankly, we'd like input on others that we don't have here. Category A means it's an eligible project, there is a decent cost estimate, and we sense strong support. So we have Town Hall, for sure, and then we have the school department grant for the fields. Next, Category B, there's some question on eligibility. The cost is a guesstimate. Project needs a little more definition. And we put in a holding for new community housing. There's really nothing tied to it, but we've been the original founding source of funds for the Affordable Housing Trust. We've given them off grants almost every year for many years now. They're starting to get more revenue now from some of the developments that have to pay for not building the affordable housing. But we put in this placeholder, but it's not tied to any project. Next. Category C, there's really no project yet. Costs are unclear. Even the project support's in question. We were approached by friends of the skate park at Pingree Park, Thomas Boynton, I believe. It was a study for $25K to convert the Pingree Park tennis courts to a skateboard park. But they don't have the support of the Joint Recreation Board, the Wenham Selectmen, or the Wenham CPC yet, so they're not yet ready for prime time. And then we have the replace the roof on the American Legion on School Street. We've had this project on our list for 4 or 5 years now, but there's been no action or no discussion or no support that we see. But we keep it. Next. Historical distribution of the grants we've given out since 2006. You can see the total number of grants has been 94. And the percent of the total number, 35% have been open space and recreation, 50% have been historic preservation, 15% community housing. And the 15 is because we're driven by requests from the Affordable Housing Trust. This is not something that comes from anywhere else. And you can see the dollars and the percent of the dollars. So the bulk of the dollars have gone to historic preservation, followed by open space and rec. Total $12,000,003. Next. Who got all this money? I apologize, I hate slides you can't read, but since you're going to get a copy, you'll be able to read it. But I wanted to show you who got all this money, this $12.3 million. And the Public Works and the Recreation Department got the bulk of it, 60% of the dollars. And you can see that it lists all the different organizations, how many grants they've received, what percent of the total that was, either the number of the dollars, and we go all the way down to Boy Scout Troop 35, they got $4,200. So we have the in our files all the details on all of these. Next, please. So the historical distribution of the grants has been 94 grants worth $12.3 million. Number of organizations receiving grants, 19. The number of town organizations receiving grants is 10, or about half of them. The number of grants received by the towns is 64. It's about 68% of the grants. The total dollars received by town organizations is $9 million, which is 74% of the total. So I think the CPC grant process is doing its job in keeping some of these grants off the backs of the town budget by using CPC money. Next, we have a two-step process for how you get a grant. As I mentioned before, there's a determination of project eligibility and verification that the requester can do the projects. We do have occasion where people come and ask for grants when they really don't have the authority or the support to make the project happen, and that's not going to work. The application for funding is that we look closely at the cost estimate and ask for identification of additional sources of funding. Then a comment on approved grants. When the CPC approves the grants, it goes on the warrant for the following town meeting. The subsequent reviews, which do happen by the Select Board and the Finance and Advisory Committee, are advisory only. The detailed reviews that they do are provided either beforehand or at town meeting to the voters to reflect how the town finance organization feels about them. And we recently voted on a provision that says any grants approved at town meeting must be started within 2 years. More detailed information than what I just gave you is available in our annual report, which should be published and posted to our webpage by next month. It completes the statutes, how do you define historical and open space and rec, a lot of details. And our meetings are 7 p.m. on the second Thursday of each month, year-round, and we do truly ask for public input to help us out. my name, my email if you have questions, but I'll take some questions now if you have them.
More than you'd ever thought you'd know about CPC, right? We tend to be very thorough, but and to Jay's credit, he does so much of this work, it's incredible. But it really is a ton of information because we always get so many questions, because that's one of the things that people don't understand is how the surcharge works, what it goes to, what the categories are. So having Jay as a resource and putting this together every year is really, really an asset for us. So if anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to go for it.
Jay, thank you again for all your detail.
Thanks.
A quick question or just comment. Obviously, I'm personally in favor of the 3%. You talk about it every year, but we don't really take action for it. So I guess the question is sort of, who has to sort of support it? Would it be from us? Would it be from you? What's the next steps? And then, do we think there's enough need for it? I mean, I know you have $1 million in reserves right now, and sometimes you have a hard time getting applications because of the process, but I'm always in favor of the town paying itself back, right, and putting some money away for a rainy day. So do you think there's enough need for it? And what's the process that we would need to do to sort of, and then what's the pay, no, if we started the process now, how long would it take to see the benefits of that? So it's a sort of a three-part question.
Yeah, I think I can answer that. The process for making it happen would probably take 2 to 2.5 years. It's a very lengthy process. You've got to go to the CPC, then to town meeting, and then you've got to have the Department of Revenue monitor 12 months of collections, but it only has to be a certain 12 months of the year. And of course, the way the town meetings line up, it doesn't line up properly. So then you have to wait till the next one, and then you have to wait until the next town meeting. So I figured it out last year, and I have a document I wrote myself that I didn't want to present, but it's about 2.5 years to make it happen. Is there a project or is there a reason why we should do it? Well, other than the fact we get a lot of money with not a lot of cost, the problem is there is no large project right this minute that I could see. I mean, if we had it right this second, boy, would that help town hall renovation or even the fields at the high school, middle school, but we've never had to make a decision between two projects because of lack of funds. It's never happened. And it's probably not going to happen moving forward in the near term. So to make it happen, I think you'd need a small citizens committee to happen. We would certainly, the CPC has constantly taking draft votes on this idea, and we haven't taken one in a few months, but every time we take a vote, it's unanimous. Yeah, let's do it. But I think it would take somebody representing a project that would save the town some money, that would make a difference, and that would be the reason for doing it.
That's one town. It's one town vote.
No, it would be a town meeting vote, and then you'd have to go to the polls.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
And plus, just for clarification too, when Jay was talking about the length of the process and with the months that the DOR takes the calculation from, when we first established it, and currently, we're always using last year's revenues. So we're always kind of a year behind. So when we've adopted the CPC in 2005, we had to wait a full year plus a little bit because of the way the town meeting date was, and then they wanted us to collect that first year of revenue, and then it was kind of retroactive after that. So that's why you're kind of behind it a little bit. So it's not like an immediate thing once it changes. If we did vote at the 3%, that it would go right there. It, like Jay said, it'd probably take 2.5 years for the whole process to get started, or happen anyway.
And then Joe, if we get, does it affect our override limit, or because we were putting base in a savings account, but does that actually affect?
It's a surcharge. It doesn't affect
that.
the.
Right, which is good, right? So people think
doesn't
about
affect the problem.
And then, I always struggle personally with the asks that are not necessarily community property or community projects, and so those are the ones I struggle with. I see that we've done 70. I think you had a stat 70-something% has been, and it's 20. Do you know what the state average is in terms of other communities? Is it 50-50? Is it 90-10? Do you, in terms of how do we rank in the state in terms of money that we give back to the community versus that we give to private organizations that ask for it and that fall within the categories? Do you know what that is?
I don't know, and I'm thinking to myself, I mean, the database is public database on the Community Preservation Coalition webpage, but I don't even think that calculation is there. You'd have to go into a specific community, and you'd have to eyeball it, I think. I mean, I don't think that's collected anywhere, no. I did it just to see how we were doing in that thing.
I think it's a great thing to look at, something that we struggle with, we talk about it here, and, I know we have a conversation on town hall, but I thought we had cash towards town hall, but it was bond on this, so you have no cash reserve for town hall right now? It was always a bond?
It's only $4 million in bond, but during the 4 or 5 years since 2017 that we've been working with the Town Hall Building Committee, we've given 5 grants to the project totaling $4,475,000.
And how much of that is unspent?
$4 million.
Okay, so we do have, so there's money sitting in an account.
We put money in Town Hall, but then the latest has been 2 separate grants, $1 million and a $3 million. So right now, we just have $4 million riding, and right now, as you saw, we only have 53 grand left for bonding, so the likelihood of taking out more money for bonding, no, but we have 1.2 million in cash. So,
Thank you, Jay.
And most likely if it were to be championed by someone for a 3%, the increase, most likely have to be a citizen's petition, I think, because it started as a citizen's petition.
Yeah.
So that's the way it has to stay.
you're right.
And it'd be a citizen's petition both to get it onto the town warrant and then onto
Correct.
the ballot as well.
Right.
So,
And then the rule about the ballot, you can't have a special election right afterwards. It has to be separated by 90 days minimum of something like that. I mean, the rules are very cumbersome.
And that's why the timeline's kind of
and
stretched.
I'm asked because I'm not 100% sure, but could the initiative be started at a special town meeting, or does it have to be initiated at an annual town meeting?
I don't think it matters.
Either one,
Yeah.
either one.
Anybody else?
Yeah, one quick question. First, a comment, actually, Jay. That was great presentation. Really, really helpful. So really appreciated. On the deciles, and I'm still really scratching my head about the fact that we're 3 deciles away from Wenham. Do those generally change year to year? Are they reset every year, or any further color on how that? How we could maybe go about changing our decile?
The most recent decile setting, I think, was 2016, and it hasn't changed since then.
Okay.
It doesn't change
But-
very often.
But if you would like to talk to the Department of Revenue, I'd be much appreciated. You could tell me how they do it, because I have no idea.
Yeah, no, I can't imagine why we would be that dramatically different from Wenham, unless there's something in the formula that affects that, which I can't imagine what that would be.
Yeah, and that's why when Jay was talking about the groupings, there's some communities in there that you really do kind of scratch your head. Why are they in this grouping? I don't know. Anybody else? Board of Selectmen, Select Board, FinCom, CPC? You gave them too much information, Jay. They don't have
I
any
think-
questions.
That was the deal.
That's the way to do it, I guess.
That's why I said to hold the questions.
I wrote them all down.
They all,
You're going to hear the answer.
yeah.
I have just a random clarifying question. The $500,000 for the fields, I
Yes.
was in a conversation a couple months back that there was a lawsuit about a similar grant for fields that was later had to be paid back because it couldn't be school grounds. There was like a nuance that like if you touch the buildings, it voids it, but if it's just maintenance of the land itself, I thought that one was on the back burner until we clarified that. Is this representative that we did clarify what makes it okay to pay for school fields?
So there's different things that the CPC can pay for. They can't pay for what we call the carpet, the
Yep.
turf itself. I think it's their stadium seating we can't pay for.
Yeah.
There's a couple other things, but I can't remember. It's kind of those additional things. We can do site work. We can do R&D stuff. What else, Jay?
Grass fields, certainly.
Grass field stuff
Track.
like that. Track.
Okay. There's a $500,000 worth of that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We're talking, well, the chair of that,
The carpet itself is about $500,000 typically, 400, 500,000.
that
We
project.
can't pay for that.
We can't pay for
Right,
that with
that's okay.
CPC.
But the other
But just
stuff.
if you're thinking of kind of costs of different
Yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
Right now, the estimate for that project is 12 to 13 million. And the chair of that committee is sitting to my left.
Just clarification, yeah.
Up to 12, But again, we have private funding that's already started, so it's not gonna be a full ask of the town. And we're also, we can't say that yet, but it will be. We are doing our best to make sure that the impact to the town and taxpayers is the minimum they can be.
Awesome, thanks.
The reason for the 500K that's in there is that we've had extensive discussions with the chair of the Wenham CPC, and we would probably need to follow the 1/3, 2/3 ratio of school expenses. And so the latest discussion suggests that the Hamilton CPC would put up 500K, but as you can see, we have more money. And we'll see where we go from there. The Wenham CPC just had a turnover of 2 or 3 members. They have a new chair, but they don't meet until September, October of this year. And my plan is to try to set up a joint meeting with them to discuss what they're going to do about this and what they think. So we'll see.
And again, it was just my ignorance on what you can and can't do, and I heard school and it triggered a memory.
Well, again, as I mentioned earlier, this eligibility is a real, we would obviously turn to town council at one point to make sure we were doing the right thing, but the amount of money we're proposing, you can find 500K worth of stuff in a project this large, so we don't see any problems.
Awesome, thank you.
Anybody else? All right.
We have now the next item on the CPG agenda is Town Hall renovation, CPC grants, date extension discussion. Can I say something first?
Yeah, go for it.
I guess the current plan is to go to town meeting on October 1st and ask for a not-to-exceed number for construction funding for Town Hall, and then go to the polls on November 8th and ask the populace, the voters, to support it. I brought up this idea of an extension date because the drop-dead date for start of construction for the 4 million in grants is November 15th of this year. I brought up this idea last January, saying, hey, shouldn't we put an extension in there in case we don't meet the deadline and lose the grants? And it was generally agreed, yeah, probably a good idea. But recently, and I want to say in the last month or so, I believe town council Tom McEnany said that the issuance of a building permit would suffice to constitute start of the project. So if the project is approved at town meeting on October 1st, the voters approve on November 8th, there's certainly enough time to issue a building permit between November 8th and November 15th. So my feeling right now is if the project passes, you really don't need a date extension. If it doesn't pass, do you want to have a warrant article to be voted on to extend the date so that we don't lose the grants? Because if there isn't an extension on that date, the 4 million in grants would have to be reapproved and revoted at town meeting in the future. So I think that's where we are right now.
I concur. I think that we've got a lot of moving parts, as everyone in the room knows, and I think best case scenario, the town hall goes back to town meeting, gets approved at town meeting, gets approved at the ballot, we pull a building permit. But the odds of that happening, I don't want to say I'm a glass half empty guy, but I'm not sure if that's going to pass muster. We've got schools now, it's new school building possibility. We've also got Gordon Conwell, and we've got a turf field project at the same time. So my kind of thought is, and I'll give you a little kind of aside too, is my thought is that tonight we would discuss an extension, and I would say go for the extension as kind of the backup, as a safety net for us in case things don't happen or something changes that we don't bring town hall to town meeting this fall. And I say that because of all the different moving parts going on, I don't know if we'll get the support. We haven't had any issue with it at town meeting getting support. It's at the ballot we've had the issue. And if people are thinking that we're gonna have to pay for a new school, they're gonna probably not wanna pay for a new town hall. So
You are a glass half.
I am a glass half empty. But so the other thing is, I think the select board, Joe and I talked a little bit earlier today, and I talked with Alex and Tim, that I think, as Alex said, and I agreed, we have to have kind of a come-to-Jesus moment about town hall in the next couple select board meetings to talk whether we're really gonna pursue it at fall town meeting or whether we're gonna pause on it and think about other options. Because I think we've got so much coming together right now that we really need to sit down and be really smart and strategic about it. I just don't wanna go and push ahead with something that is gonna flop again for a third time at a ballot question and be stuck. If you just, yeah, John, if you just mind pulling the mic over so people at home can hear you.
John McGrath. The FinCom's been discussing over the last several months, you know, all the convergence of the financial desires of the town. And if you stop and think about it, the most critical, this is John McGrath talking right now. The most critical financial opportunity that the town has at the moment is ensuring state funding for the school. All right? That's in the $40 million range.
Easy.
All right? So from a risk standpoint, the smartest thing the town can do is to raise the probability that the funding from the state for the school happens. So my thought is you don't want to interrupt that vote if it's going to happen in October. That's a $40 million opportunity for the town. You're talking about a town hall that is largely funded already, right? A CPC commitment and then some of the money that's already there. So anyway, I've given this a lot of thought and you know, from a financial risk standpoint or opportunity standpoint, you really want to give the schools the opportunity to secure that money and don't disrupt that very scripted state MBSA process. So that's sort of how I think about it. Whether I'm an advocate for the school or not, financially, that's probably the top consideration.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you've also got 13 or an $8.5 million fields project there as well. So if you start to line all this up, we've got a huge capital appetite.
Yeah.
Close to $120 million that Hamilton and the schools are looking at.
Right.
So that's
right.
A perspective,
Yeah, right.
whether people agree with it or not.
Right.
I would add to that the town meeting is 10 weeks from now.
Right.
And from a purely PR perspective, like centralization of information and distribution of information, like we have tripped over that year after year after
Yes.
year. And I agree 100%. Like we need an initiative, maybe two, clear communication, clear representation of the situation and the facts, because I mean, the town hall thing has gotten away from us so many. I don't think 10 weeks is enough time for the type of PR campaign it would take to get people on the side that we would want them to be on if we're going to bring it up again.
Right.
I just don't think that's realistic to do that. So
Right.
I agree with what John's saying. I think there's too many irons in the fire.
Right. And I'll throw one more or two more in there with the school project. If it comes to fruition, we may be closing the Winthrop campus and maybe even closing the Cutler campus, depending on what they want for site, right? We could open both of those sites up. Maybe one will open up. We don't know yet once they do their feasibility study. So if we're thinking about town hall, it could be in one of those two spots, or the Gordon situation as well. Maybe it's at Pilgrim Hall permanently. So we've got all these options that are kind of all at once, and trying to figure that out is the sticky wicket at the moment. But to kind of bring it back full circle here to talk about the extension. So let's discuss kind of CPC thoughts on the extension. At our last meeting, we talked about it, and it seemed like everyone was for it. But we should discuss it more, and then any input from FinCom and the select board on whether they think that we should extend it, so that it's kind of a placeholder. We can always, if we decide tonight to extend it from the CPC, and we move forward and something happens in the mix, we can always leave it off the warrant or just take no action on it as well. So there's kind of options within options here, so.
But just from my perspective on the CPC, and I'll let fellow members of the committee comment, we're talking about a virtual escrow of like $333,000 a year by extending the $4 million in grants or letting it ride. So it means we only have $53K available to bond anything for as long as we put the extension.
They're holding that, right?
And so to extend the November 15 date, somebody in this room would have to make a motion that we extend the start of construction to a new date. So we need a date, and then the members of the CPC, since we have a quorum, could vote on that tonight. And if we vote and approve an extension out to some date and time, that could be a warrant article. But I'll repeat the words of our Vice Chair, Robert Preston, months, not years. So, I don't know, does anyone from the CPC want to make a comment on the idea?
I have a question. How many times can we keep asking for an extension? Will this be the only time?
We've never made up any rules for it.
No?
This is kind of the first time,
Yeah.
so it.
Because
we're
if you're
kinda-
saying months, I could see us coming back and doing this 5 times.
Yeah, there's no rules as to how many times you can do it. I mean,
I would,
Spend the money, you still need to put the 333 in escrow
we still gotta hold it, yeah.
every year.
Yeah.
Even though we're not spending it.
Yep. So it's kinda always there,
You have to have it for that first bond payment for whenever you do bond.
yeah.
Can you, it's gonna max out at 333? Do you have to go to like 333 one year and then 666?
Well, the 333, if I can add, is a ballpark, because we haven't
Right.
locked in any rate.
Right, yeah.
And when we first had the rate, it was like half of that.
yeah,
Now that the rate-
3.25.
Now that the rate's gone up, doubled, our escrow is kind of doubled on it. So
I'm
if
sorry,
rates
the-
go down again, it could be,
Counting though of it, we have 1.1 million in CPCs. Any of that money earmarked for this, or is that in a separate account right now?
Yeah. That's our reserves right now. And that's independent of the 4 million in grants.
the 1.2 is
Yeah.
separate.
That's
No,
up.
but we started to build that 333 escrow yet.
Well, we just keep an eye on it every year to make sure.
It's in the 1.1.
Yeah, every year, if somebody comes up with a grant, we just take the look to make sure that we have enough in our reserves, and we, right now, would shy away from a bond because we need to
can't,
preserve it.
I would make the suggestion, I know Robert, it says months, but I would just make it another 2-year extension. That would be my thought of it. But I don't know what other people's thoughts are in CPC, FinCom, or Select Board.
I'm fine with that as long as the escrow doesn't go over 333. I know it's a guess, but it's not going to go over 333 every year. Is my ask.
Well, how fast do you think bond rates will change? Laurie checked on this
On
the
the
other
feds.
day.
Somewhere between 300 and 400,000 is what we're going to keep in escrow for the next 1 to 2 years.
Most likely.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that. I would have a problem with more if it got to 800.
Right. The interest rate went up to 8% or something like
You're
that.
paying more if they keep, yeah.
Right.
Can I ask another question? This is probably for the board. Is it possible to package the school renovation, the field, and town hall into one project?
That's great.
No, unfortunately not.
Yeah.
The MSBA requires a separate.
It's got to be separate with the MSBA.
For the school
Joe said.
project. So they won't even be able, it's likely they wouldn't even be able to roll the Fields project into the school question.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fields are not eligible for state reimbursement,
True.
so that's,
And that's why they
it's
want to
off the
keep it
table.
separate.
Yeah, has to be separate.
Wheels turning in people's heads, is that what's going on?
But I think that it's important enough that we need to, we have a shovel-ready project, and I think that we got 2 new members on the board just in the last few months, and I think it's, and unfortunately, October is a bad day, because this school year hasn't even started yet, coming off of summer, so it's hard, like you said, to build consensus, but I think for all the work that we did, it makes sense to give it an extension, and I think 1 year's not enough, so I think 2 year makes the
Right.
most sense.
Mm.
But,
And with the 2-year, we'll have the MSBA kind of figured out by that time. By the time the study that we're looking to pay for at town meeting happens, that's about an 18-month process. So we'll be kind of in that window that we'll know what's going to happen with Winthrop and Cutler.
Most of the construction costs come down.
What's that?
Wouldn't know what the proposal is.
Wouldn't know what the proposal is anyway, right?
I think construction costs are sort of in a strange place right now, so.
Right, because you're adding about, what, like 26% to almost every bid, so it's, yeah.
Doing anything now doesn't make any sense, so I think it makes sense to push it forward, but, so I'm in favor of that, what you said, 24-month extension.
I mean, it's going to be an awkward warrant article to present to people. You know, here, please put this large amount of money aside that, in case we might want to spend it in the future. So it's going to be awkward, and I'm just sitting here.
It's going to be challenging regardless, right?
Right. But I think it's actually the most conservative thing to do. We're basically it's a way of putting that on hold for now, which I still, part of me, I'm glad we have John McGrath here who can look at this, just looking at the numbers, because I know a lot of us, there was so much time invested in this. We had it all set up. It was perfectly set up. It was perfect timing to go ahead with this town hall building project. And I'm still having a hard time letting go of that, but that those times have passed, I guess. So I think we're not ready to completely put all of that work and thought and effort into the dustbin, and we're also not ready to move forward on it right now. It's not going to be successful if we do, so yeah.
That's exactly how I feel.
So that is what the purpose of this extension would be, is to just put that on hold right now while we try to figure everything else out.
The decision by the MBSA on the schools would be no sooner than July 2024.
Right.
So it's 2 years out, so you won't have the final vote by the board on the project if everything goes according to plan.
Right.
So you got to be at least 2 years out, I would think, just to give yourself the flexibility.
I think it's a good compromise, and I think that the town wouldn't support a conflicting ask to the CPC that you'd have to struggle with, right? We're saying, oh, we're gonna put this money aside, and you're not gonna be able to spend it on something else. We're not gonna put something else in front of you the next 2 years to make that conflict an issue, right? That's the goal, right? It could come from a private source, but.
Yeah,
it's not
I
gonna
don't
come
see
from
any
the town.
other, there's no other town grants really needed, I think, at the moment, that I foresee. DPW has stuff every once in a while with different projects, but I don't see anything big coming up on the horizon. I mean, we have, our two big projects are the turf field and the school, and that's about it, other than a skate park, which, and we're talking maybe 25 to 50,000, and that's really nothing compared to.
And then we get replenished.
We're getting another half a million each year.
Another
basically.
$500,000 at the end of the year, so.
Right, it's not like we have a one-time amount of money that's gonna go away.
Do you foresee someone coming to ask for funds for what might happen with Chabaco? Like what happened with, what's Greenbelt, the
Oh, like a
Fields?
land
Could that be a potential
acquisition?
big ask that we aren't thinking about?
I think I mean,
I don't,
consensus to help fund since public land since we did the last one.
Right.
You know, so I doubt, but.
I mean, someone could come, it could happen, but I wouldn't see the same support. Sagamore was such a large project. It was multiple towns, one of the biggest, I think, land acquisitions almost on the East Coast in a long time. So it was a totally different kind of a project. I don't
But
foresee
I just
it.
didn't know if that might
But it is
come.
a possibility if somebody wanted to try.
Seek consensus.
But then it would depend on our appetite too for eligibility with it. Right, because we've given quite a bit to open space, even though, you know, that's $2 million for the open space,
Yeah. Well,
so.
I mean, if you take out the $4 million that's dedicated to the town hall that hasn't been spent yet, you've actually given way more to open space than you've given to anything else. in
Right, open
CPC.
space and rec, yeah, exactly.
By a lot.
By a lot.
Yeah.
In a similar vein, could someone ask that more be given, basically bonded for turf fields, which this would obviously preclude?
Say that again, John?
Well, effectively, like, you know, I know that the discussion might be that there's, 500,000 that's in discussion, but that would just be cash. But could someone say, hey, could the CPA provide $2 million? But it would be bonded. And this would somehow preclude that because you couldn't bond it.
Well, I think someone could, but it most likely wouldn't happen. The reason is because of the ratio that we've kind of stuck with Wenham versus Hamilton on the split. Like with the stabilization fund we have, for instance, from the sale of the Patton Ridge property, that's a $500,000, right? So I have the feeling that when Wenham comes to ask their town meeting for money, they might not get the ratio. And we can only spend that ratio with CPC and with the town, so we may not spend that $500K in reserve. We may have left over from that didn't meet the ratio, and the same with the CPC. If they ask for X number from CPC, we have to work on that ratio, so it might not be that huge ask. Plus, their CPC is a different dynamic. They're much more conservative, and they only meet a few times, and sometimes things miss deadlines, and there's not, I will say, from the kind of candor of some of the members that I've talked to recently, there's not really any support, if you've watched any of those meetings, for a turf field with their CPC.
Right, so it's theoretically possible, but practically probably not.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, back to the 2-year, so
Yep.
who needs to make a motion?
So I would say we're lucky to have Mr. Tim Olson here tonight that brought many of the grants before the CPC. I would think that he would have to kind of sponsor it, and then someone on CPC, and anybody can correct me if I'm wrong on this, would make a motion to accept the proposal by Mr. Olson. And then we would debate it on the CPC and move forward on it.
Yep. The other Mr. Olson.
The other Mr. Olson. Sorry.
Thank you. Tim Olson, DPW Director. So as Sean pointed out, I'm here to ask ask for a 2-year extension to the Town Hall renovation CPC project funding. Let me just talk a little bit about where we are, actually. We've done a lot of work, as Jay said, since 2017. So 5+ years. We've had a Town Hall Building Committee. Myself, just as a DPW director, I've been on the committee for the full 5 years. We are still trying to get something done here for this, at this building. It is a concern of mine. It's an aging building. Just today, we've had some electrical issues that we're dealing with. It's a low voltage problem that we're having. It's an intermittent problem, but it's showing signs of an aged building. And I think we need to really think about housing our town employees in a much better environment, safe environment, something that is updated and adequate to be able to function our AC units as well as computers and everything, all the new technology today to make our, to make the business happen. So I'm asking for a 2-year extension to our CPC ask, and appreciate motion and approval. Thanks. I am here for questions if you have any. I'd be happy to answer them.
In order to open it up for a discussion among the CPC, could I ask one of the members of the CPC to make a motion so we could debate it? I can't make a motion.
So moved.
You moved? Okay. So we have a motion on the floor to extend the November 15th, 2022 date out 2 years.
Need a second?
Yeah, do you
You need a second?
Second?
Yep, okay. Well, I'll speak first on the matter. Looking ahead over the next couple of years, other than the turf field, the athletic field, and I think the number of 500K is a pretty good number. And we ballpark 250K for the Affordable Housing Trust. And beyond that, I don't see any big projects. I mean, there'd be some smaller ones, but we have 1.2 million in reserves, and we'll get more with another healthy state match this year. So we will have money to entertain grants from other organizations. So I think we could afford to virtually escrow the $4 million in grants and the corresponding $333,000 for bond repayments. So I think we could support it. I think the town hall project is too important. And yeah, with this culmination of these large capital projects, as John points out, I think I would support something like this. So why don't we go down around the room? Sean, you want to say something?
No. I think everybody knows where I kind of stand on it. So I'll let the rest of the group speak. Michelle, if you want to say anything.
Could you speak into the mic?
Certainly. And I thank you, John, for bringing that point up, looking at the schools and the big asks that are coming down the pike. But the school's position is that these projects can happen, but we have to work. It's not one against the other. We really want to try and work together to make these projects come to fruition. So I do support, as Jay does, the extending the grant funding.
I'm sorry, I don't know who you are, please.
I'm sorry, Michelle Horgan.
From what committee?
I'm on the Housing Authority, but I'm on the CPC.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Kim?
No, I am in favor of extending it, and I will just bring this up now. I do think we need a venue in town where we can communicate something with the Chronicle gone, because I think that's part of there's a lot of misinformation, and I think Facebook has killed any type of accuracy. So I just want to put that out there, if there's a way we could get some type of communication mechanism out.
Okay, thank you. Sandy?
Jay, I think you said it very well, and I see it the way you do. I don't have anything new to add beyond what you've said.
Okay, thank you. Richard?
What he just said.
Okay, does anyone else want to make a comment before we take a vote? We're very democratic in the CPC. We allow anybody to speak who's in the room. Anybody want to make a comment? Yes?
Hey, just come up to the microphone there.
My only thought is this, because it didn't pass, that we have to do a really good job. It seems like most people in the room are in favor of the town hall, but there's a large section of the community that's not. So when you put this forward, you need to talk about some of the things that Tim just mentioned, and sort of the reason and the need for it. That, to me, seems very important, particularly in the Facebook world that we're living in. So that's the only thing I would say, is you got to do a really good job in presenting why this is really needed.
Okay, thank you.
And just 2 cents on Heather's comment there is that I agree. I think when we really do move forward with this in whatever capacity that we've had a town hall building committee, but I think we need a kind of a campaign committee that's really going to be the PR of the bunch that really get it out there. So.
Okay, why don't we go for a vote? This is a roll call vote, so I vote yes for the 2-year extension. Robert Preston's not here. Sean Farrell?
Yes.
Yes. Kim Dietel?
Yes.
Kirsten's not here. Rick Johansson's not here. Michelle?
Yes.
Sandy?
Yes.
And Richard Boroff?
Yes.
Passes.
Thank you very much.
So that'll be one article on the town meeting warrant.
Yep. So, also, I don't know what.
Some more to talk about.
Discussion about possible STM
Yeah.
articles.
So up next, we have for kind of the CPC and joint meeting, we have discussed proposed STM articles. So I know we don't really have anything really besides our kind of housekeeping. So Jay, if you want to speak to that, and then if anybody on FinCom or Select Board wants to comment on it, and then once we're done with that, we can close the CPC portion of the meeting if you'd like.
I don't know as though the CPC has any housekeeping matters. Those are usually taken up at the annual meeting. So
Right.
Special town meeting, I don't think there are any issues that we would have other than the extension that we just voted. So
That's it.
anybody else in the CPC disagree with that? Okay, if that's it, could I have a motion to adjourn the CPC portion of the meeting? Okay.
Portion of the meeting.
Okay, let's have a vote. I vote
Second
yes. Sean seconds it. Robert's
yes.
not here. You vote yes. Kim?
Yes.
Michelle?
Doesn't need to be roll call. You're all here in person. So you can-
Sandy?
That's true.
Richard? We're just very proper.
We're very
It's-
formal here.
It's,
Committee in town.
we're 8:35. We adjourned.
Thank you very much, CPC, for joining us tonight.
Take care.
Right.
And you are free to go home
Thanks, guys.
or stay, whatever your prerogative is.
Might stay.
The rest of you are free to spread out.
Yeah, and if people want to reorganize to this side, they're more than welcome to.
I'll stay and I'll move into the peanut gallery.
All right.
Just let Sean know.
I don't think it would have made a difference.
Anybody shuffling? Are you
I'm gonna
shuffling?
hop over
Okay.
there. I like Tom, but
Yeah. Yeah.
wait, where'd Bill go?
Leaving as well, I think.
For good?
For the meeting.
All right, for the folks at home, we're just doing a little reshuffle here.
Good.
And also, Select Board Member Bill Olson has left the meeting for the evening. He had a prior obligation.
I know. Sit at the head table.
All right, so as part of the joint meeting with FinCom, we also had discuss special town meeting articles. We talked about the proposed debt exclusion. Actually, we haven't yet. We talked about town hall improvement options, et cetera, blah, blah. So, Joe, do you have the proposed articles?
Yeah, let me, give me a second to find that packet.
Page 19.
That's, yeah. No, that, we're gonna know one. Where's the packet? Why does it keep giving me that? That's all I want. Excuse me a second. 1 second. Apologize, everybody. I had it up and it won't come. Nothing for me. You know things are getting bad when even with your readers you can't find what you're looking for. I just have to.
I think go back. I think it's 19.
Yeah, right there. Oh, one down. There you go.
Yep. All right, so just for folks at home and myself, we really can't see the screen, but we have our draft list is approved funds for a feasibility study phase for the Hamilton Wenham Regional School District to replace Cutler and Winthrop School. Maybe a companion to debt exclusion ballot question. Approve paying bills of the previous year. Approve requests to utilize other town sources to reduce costs of town hall renovation. Maybe a companion to the debt exclusion ballot question. Approve extension of CPC funds for town hall renovations, which we discussed. Approve amendments to the Hamilton Conservation Bylaw. Approve use of funds for the fuel facility. approve use of funds to complete retrofit of leased property for temporary town hall, and approve possible zoning bylaw amendments.
And I want to add, I tried to amend this earlier today and add one to approve the wage and compensation grids for the 3 union contracts that just got settled.
Okay.
Yeah, that was on.
That was, it's not on this one, but it was on the one.
It's
I
on the
sent.
previous one,
So,
or the new one, yeah. All right, anybody want to, I mean, I guess we can take them one at a time and comment on them, or you just want to grab one out of the hat and go for it? Doesn't matter to me. Let's just start at the top then, I guess. So we've got approved funds for the feasibility study for a new school. And Joe, if you can just kind of give us a overview of that so everyone's on the same page, and then we can chat about it.
yeah, so this article is going to need town meeting approval as well as an appropriation. Alex is on, and he'll help me remember the exact amount that we need to appropriate. But roughly, the schools are estimating about $1.3 million, $1.4 million for a feasibility study of this size. They've got $250,000 aside, so there will be a need to have a new article that will authorize the use of that $250,000. And then there will be an article to authorize Hamilton's portion of the remainder. So if it's 1.3, take out 250, you're talking 1.05. Hamilton's portion, Alex, what did they tell us, about $650,000?
Yeah, $654,000 would be our portion.
And so got 2 questions we have to decide on that is, will there be an article for that? And how do we propose funding it? If it, would there be a companion, that exclusion article on the ballot in November, or do you want to just take it out of free cash?
Right, and I guess that's the debate and the discussion for tonight. I mean, we don't have to come to conclusion, but at least talk about the options with using free cash as a one-time thing, or do we put it on the debt exclusion? And it is money that, I'll kind of air quotes, it comes back to us, right? When they finally get the ball rolling, it gets put back from the state funding, so.
And Alex, remind us, what is the state approved, MSBA approved a much higher reimbursement rate than we expected. What was that?
Yeah, the last we heard, and this wouldn't be applicable to the project yet, but I think it was 46 point something%. So it was a higher rate than we had anticipated, which was in the low 40s. So that's good news.
Yeah, 47.6.
47.6. Thank you.
And is that money reimbursed regardless of whether we're selected or regardless of whether we continue through the process, or?
Every step that we get approved, we get we'll get reimbursement for that part that's spent. So if we go forward with the feasibility study, we appropriate our share of the money. We have to pay for it, and then we get reimbursed the 47.6%. Then if something interrupts and it fails at the ballot question to build the school, or the feasibility study somehow determines that it's not feasible, we'd still get reimbursed for the feasibility study portion that we'd already expended.
That's why they kind of break it up, to make it easier along the way, in case something does go sideways. So, FinCom, since we have a handful of members here, your thoughts on debt exclusion versus free cash? I think I've heard through the grapevine that you're thinking debt exclusion, but I could be wrong, but what's the heated debate that you're having, or is there a heated debate? Or have you thought about it yet?
I don't think there's a heated debate. I think, and people chime in, my recollection was we thought would go debt exclusion, but I don't think it's material enough to really get wrapped around.
And then I guess if you're talking debt exclusion versus free cash, for those that aren't versed on municipal finance, what's the advantage versus disadvantage of each of those options? Or what is it for folks that don't know? What does debt exclusion mean? What does free cash mean?
Are you asking me, Sean?
Yeah, Alex, if you could explain it, that'd be best.
Sure. So free cash would just take out of reserves that we have. Essentially, think of them in the bank. So savings. Our last certified free cash number was $4.17 million. So this, use of free cash would, in addition to any other free cash usage, would take us down below the $3.5 million floor for usage. A debt exclusion just means that we can take on the debt without it impacting our Prop 2.5, like our override number. So this is exclusive of Proposition 2.5. So we would borrow the money, but it wouldn't impact our, sort of our Prop 2.5 position.
And could you explain Prop 2.5 for folks too?
Sure. Prop 2.5 is a law in Massachusetts that essentially says that you can't raise values in any community more than 2.5% in any given year. It also means that the total valuation of the town can't be more than 2.5% of the entire valuation. So your tax rate will never go above $25 per $1,000 in value, essentially.
And if it does, you go basically in the receivership or.
Yeah, that would put you over the Prop 2.5 threshold. And so currently we're operating at a $17.88 tax rate. Wyndham is up in the $19 range. It just varies town by town based on sort of how things have unfolded over the years.
And Alex, I'm sorry. Alex, one of the real costs would be the interest that we'd have to pay on the bond, right? Do we have any sense of what that would be in today's interest rate environment on the $1 million or the 600,000?
It would, it'd come down to the amount borrowed, but if we're at a 5% interest rate, which is kind of what we're hearing for municipal bonds right now, the interest would be pretty sizable. It would be a big difference if we're talking a $70 million project versus $90 million. I did put together some projections, but I don't know if we're quite ready to go there yet.
So my question was more just on the feasibility study, the 600,000 that we'd be asking for this.
Yeah. I mean, yes, anytime you borrow money, you're going to be paying interest on it. That is definitely true. So yeah, that's a consideration we have to make.
Can I hear from John?
Alex, I thought you had shared with us the text of the statute or reg that required the approach of borrowing.
Right.
I sent along what the superintendent sent to us, and I think that I don't know if it says that you have to borrow it. I'll have to review it again, David.
It was in the first few lines of what you had provided.
Okay, well, that may make the decision easy.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were only looking at it because we thought the whole project was going to be obviously bonded. So you had to start with this. But I don't think it was just potentially that we had to bond it if it was just for this discrete study, unless we had to.
That's correct.
Because,
You're not required to bond for the feasibility study.
Yeah. And I don't think we have the cash to pay for the whole thing in the end, so pretty sure we're going to bond it in the end.
Right, I mean, we have to bond it. That's why we thought we had to actually bond. This was a piece of bonding the entire thing, which obviously we have to bond the whole thing.
You thought this was a small cog in the wheel kind of thing, yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So can I hear from John Prulidge and David Wanger if your thoughts on whether it should be paid out of free cash or borrowed?
I would support the borrowing approach.
For this amount, if we're going to get roughly 50% of it back, I don't find using free cash really problematic, especially if it, saves us a little bit in interest while we figure out whether we're going to bond the entire project. I think I also feel more comfortable using free cash if we know exactly how much we're getting back from FY22 as we're closing those books.
But we ought to take another look at the governing language as to what's a permissible funding approach.
Absolutely, yeah. Like that's the threshold question. If we have to bond it.
If we have to, we have to.
Exactly.
So, Alex, kind of question for you: if we have the option, and we bond it or borrow it, whatever. Now, with interest on that, are they paying back? Does that total number include paid back with interest, or is that just on the initial amount? Would we be paying more out if we bonded?
Yeah, I think that it's only on principal that they pay back.
Principal. All right. I'd be curious as that number. I'm sure it's
Yeah, I'll
not
verify
a ton,
that.
but it's, every penny counts. I guess that would be my only reason why I would think I would lean towards free cash.
Yeah, let me, I'll get
Because
answers
they're
to
gonna replace
these
it and we're,
questions.
we're okay if we, it's not a ton of money, but it's, it's a bit.
Yeah, it'd be a big, it may have an impact on, really what our kind of other considerations could be for free cash, basically.
Yes.
And which there's a lot, as
Right.
we sort of ground cut that was covered earlier.
Right. What other capital stuff we've got that might come out of there.
Exactly.
If the funding is through borrowing, does this go a bit, in addition to town meeting, to a ballot question?
Yes.
Yes. Anytime we're gonna do a debt exclusion, it's gotta be in the ballot.
Right.
Which, just so you know, the board will have to make a decision by your next meeting, August 1st, because any debt
You have to get it
any-
posted and everything,
Well,
so.
the language has to be turned into the state by August 3rd. So if you're gonna add a ballot question to a state ballot, they have to have it by August 3rd.
So another argument in favor of borrowing is to get as much public participation in the underlying question of new school, the town meeting attendance being fairly limited. The ballot broadens public view.
Depending.
Let me actually ask one other question is, can you keep the option open in a sense, go down the debt exclusion path, but if we set it at the end of the day to fund it out of free cash, can we do that?
Essentially remove the question from the ballot? I don't,
Well, no, I mean, even if you put it to ballot, but say it failed at the ballot, could you pay it out of free cash and keep it alive?
I think you'd have to have some funky warrant language. I mean, I think you might be able to do it. Like, you would say on the warrant article something about
yeah, to appropriate.
to appropriate it through debt exclusion or free cash. I mean, we've done similar things like that in the past with different items.
Right.
But
As
we've
long as
never,
you- yeah,
it's
as long as
never
you're
been a
not
debt
appropriating
exclusion.
out of
It's either
general
been a
fund,
choice of
you're not
free
gonna get up
cash
to it
or
now.
some other mechanism, but
I think
Right.
town council could probably draft the language. I've seen it done in other towns where you give yourself the flexibility. Basically, town meeting authorizes the town to spend the money, to appropriate the money in whatever way it needs to.
Right.
And then if the debt exclusion
Exactly.
fails, you've got the,
Yeah. That's not a bad idea,
would
John,
need
to
to
kind
be
of
a-
work
yeah,
that
would need
into
to-
language.
the free cash.
I think I'd sort of reverse I think I'd go down that route, because it's not a bad thing to get the public to weigh in via the ballot, and as we go down that road, but knowing that, if, stranger things have happened, that we could always pay for it out of free cash.
I do think that the town would be putting the whole new school question in serious jeopardy if you asked for debt exclusion and it got turned down, and then you funded the feasibility study anyway. You're gonna be battling a whole lot of ill will.
Yeah, the optics are gonna be bad.
That's certainly true.
And if it fails in Wenham or Hamilton, it tanks the whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, my thought is, there's a lot of risk to this in general, just the fact that we have to have Hamilton and Wenham approve this, and now if you're looking at the debt
I think
exclusion.
you're adding more risk by the debt
You're
exclusion.
adding more risk, yeah, you're putting that on the table that you have to approve at town meeting, you have to approve it on the ballot. We're putting a lot more cards on the table that are hard it seems like free cash may be the easier solution in an already risky situation.
Less moving parts.
Yeah.
Well, and it also erases the likelihood that you're putting more burden on the taxpayer in the interim, knowing that you're gonna have to ask them for the full amount to construct when it comes to that.
Right.
When it gets to that phase. So you're gonna ask them to pay more taxes to fund a feasibility study that may or may not get funded at the next level, because
Right.
again, it's gonna need to pass two debt exclusions in two different towns.
Right.
It just complicates the matter more and more and more.
But we all have discussed the unfortunate dynamic of a distinct minority voting these kind of things at town meeting. So I'm suggesting we consider a broader public participation in a very serious fiscal question and community question by virtue of the ballot.
Yeah, I think what David is saying is we shouldn't shy away from letting people vote on it.
Yeah.
Up or down.
Right.
I mean, it may be harder to pass, but
Right.
that's, if that's the case, that's because more people voted against it. 'Cause-
Yeah, but I mean, I guess the devil's advocate, they're gonna vote on it at town meeting. And I think, David's worried about kind of quorum and people showing up at town meeting, but I would say from past experience at town meetings for the last 20 so years, that when you have a school issue, people show up. And I would think the school would show up for that.
And since it's a school issue and we're looking at Hamilton and Wenham, and then I'm assuming there's going to be some sort of joint communication plan around this between both towns, is there any interest or any appetite for aligning with Wenham, what they're doing?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, is Joe or Alex, do you know if Wenham is thinking debt exclusion or free cash? I don't think they have much free cash, is their issue.
Well, yeah, I've had a brief discussion with the town administrator, and he's thinking they're probably gonna have to debt exclude because he doesn't have
The capacity.
the capacity to just take $400,000.
Yeah.
I mean, I go back to the PR issue, which is people aren't gonna recognize that this is a question not if to pay for it, but how to pay for it. So they will vote as if they are voting whether to pay for it at all. And I'm not saying that's inherently a bad thing. I think we just need to be really careful with how this is positioned, because I think it could be killed. It could backfire on us, because people are looking for an opportunity to get their piece in on this before the whole thing has been laid out. I mean, the elephant in the room is that we've heard a lot of opposition, specifically from fixed income seniors who do not want a new school. They don't want to pay for it. They are a huge part of our voting population here. And I'm not saying we should try to maneuver this to not do it, but I just want to be mindful that if the question is, we have the money, should we pay for it or should we take out debt? I'm not sure that that's the spirit in which everyone will be voting for it. A lot of people will be voting, I don't believe in the school thing, I'm not going to vote for this at all. So if we think we can manage that conversation, and obviously Tom and I will have our wine and warrant with thousands of people in attendance beforehand. But, we need to get this off the ground so that we can have informed collaborative conversations about the longer process. And so I would say the path of least resistance makes the most sense to me, because if this goes dead in the water, we have much bigger problems.
That's right.
Kind of shoot ourselves in the foot if it doesn't pass.
Right.
With the debt exclusion.
Yeah, there's way too many hurdles already that we should try and minimize as much as we can.
FinCom.
But we think we need to be careful not to minimize these negative potential exposures by virtue of not giving it as broad a public participatory context as possible. If the public votes no, so be it. That's the governing barometer, and the town meeting attendance is such that the much broader participation is through the ballot.
I guess I hear you. I guess my concern is that to vote no on this is a false signal. And I think the spirit of, hey, let's pay for this. The question is, how do we pay for it? I think you have to be careful of it not signaling, do you want this thing to happen at all?
Well, I think we are asking people, do they want to pay for it? I mean, that's why we have to, that's why the state wants us to do this, both the feasibility study, to see if there's a support in the town for this to happen at all. So start with this one thing.
It starts there.
It's just two different methods.
Right.
Town
hall at least gives you
meeting and who's going to go to the
town meeting gives you
ballot.
the context and the conversation.
Right,
I'm just worried
I think that's the concern that you have. I have a similar concern that, as we know, people that attend town meeting have, for the most part, done the research. They've read the warrant, they've shown up, they've heard the pros and cons and the support. Whereas opposed to the ballot, you just show up and you go yay or nay. It's like you got Republican or Democrat to vote for, and you're a Democrat, and the guy could be a horrible person, but you just always vote Democrat or no on the tax increase. no tax increase, no on this.
Right.
You know, that's my worry, is that there's that snap. I don't have any information, I just have a gut feeling, or I don't want my taxes to increase 0%.
But
And
from my point of
that's my
view,
worry, though.
that,
But everyone has that prerogative too, right?
right.
I mean, it doesn't make you a bad person or whatever, you can't
yeah.
really govern that.
We cannot make this decision out of fear that some people are going to end up voting against the project.
Right.
I want them
That's-
to vote against it in the most informed way, and my concern is that that does not happen on the ballot. It happens at town meeting.
So you want to control it so they vote on it at the meeting that you want them to vote on it.
I just want people to engage with this process with the most knowledge that they can have, and I think town meeting is the process by which we give people that platform.
Right, but the election is like the basis of our democratic system, so.
I won't die on this hill.
Yeah.
If folks say this has to go on the ballot, I think,
yeah, and
for the long-term benefit of the most residents, I think it behooves us to find a way to get this to pass. I think our schools are falling apart, and if it dies here because we didn't do our best to try to at least get this money, I'm just saying, find a way to hedge the best you can, because if this dies, it impacts people for the next 20 years.
More.
Perhaps it's incumbent upon the proponents to educate the public. We have spoken about campaigns to inform the public on other issues. We've fallen short of that, except for the perhaps FinCom commentary, which goes out with a warrant. But to moderate or contain the apprehension that people are just going to viscerally, in an uninformed way, vote no, don't we have a responsibility to educate the public?
Could I just make a statement that I think the importance of this step of the process of looking at whether or not to do a new school is that it's a feasibility study, and it's supposed to lay out where and what it would look like if the towns were going to go down the road of building a new elementary school.
Right.
Then you get to the big question of, are you willing to spend whatever tens of millions of dollars it costs to do that? It costs some money up front to answer all those questions in order to get an informed vote on whether or not you want a school or not. But if you go forward with a town-wide vote, and I'm not saying you should or shouldn't, just bear in mind that if you go forward with a town-wide vote, there will be a lot of people who say, we don't have enough answers to the questions. Why would I support this? This money is to help answer questions so that people can make an informed vote on the large issue.
Right, and I think
This is specifically set up to be just a way to fund the feasibility study.
Go to the public with that exact explanation?
David, hold on a second. I think that's what David was just saying, that you'd then have to educate people about what they're voting on, that it's a feasibility study. But can I bring the FinCom back to, within our bounds of whether this is financially, is there a strong feeling that this should be paid out of free cash versus borrowed? So aside from the sort of policy questions of whether people should vote on it or what forum they should vote on it, or do we have to have a separate conversation about it?
Perhaps I'm the only one, and my memory is clouded by age, but I think that we looked at the governing language with Alex at a prior FinCom meeting and determined that free cash was not a permissible approach.
Yeah, so the language I have in front of me says, to see if the town will approve the blank dollars borrowing authorized by the, insert the name of the school district, for the purpose of paying costs of, insert description of feasibility study. So there was a suggestion that because the language says that the town will approve the blank borrowing, that it has to be a borrowing. And if that's the case, it has to be a borrowing. And I think the consensus otherwise is that borrowing is financially the better way to go, although John, I think John Prulich pointed out that if we're going to be reimbursed 50% or almost 50%, close to 50% of this, and it will save us a little bit of interest, maybe free cash would be the way to go.
Yeah, I'd go with cash unless we're required to finance it. That's where I've come down. I mean, there has to be a warrant article at town meeting. It has to be voted on at town meeting, which informs the fact that we're going after a big school, a big price tag. That has to be voted on. That's required by the state at town meeting. So I'd do cash unless we're required.
I'll make sure that we have an answer tomorrow. I'll have Eric Tracy get us
Figure
an
it out
answer this
today.
week. You'll have an answer this week from MSBA, whether it has to be borrowed or it can be, or just appropriated.
Yeah. But if it's either way, then John McGrath says cash at this point. John Prulage, are you still leaning towards cash?
I think I'm still cash. I mean, I don't want to, hide it from a ballot question, but at the same time, I am cognizant of we will be kicking ourselves if that actually sinks it, and we lose out on our ability to get this effectively half funded.
Can I weigh in with just a quick aside? So, we do have our own internal financial policies also that we maintain a 5% free cash of our operating fund budgeted amount. So, our internal policies require that we don't go below a $1.8 million in free cash. So if we reduce our 4.17 million by 685 grand, that really kind of shrinks our flexibility on this town hall project, should it go forward. The use of any sort of free cash or other reserves that we have. So that's just something that needs to be considered as well.
Right. So if we do free cash, that it will limit our amount that we dip down to, that we'd have to repay as quick as we could if we did.
Yeah, I mean, it's an opportunity cost. And so just 47% of it comes back to us, and they reimburse on sort of like a matter of weeks, not months or years. And so they're relatively quick on reimbursing through their ProPay system. But, we would have to set aside that whole amount.
Right.
And Harry, I didn't mean to shortchange you if you have something to add. Obviously, we'd.
No, I'm relatively indifferent on which path we take.
All right, so food for thought for the select board to talk about. And once we get some kind of answers from council and stuff like that, we'll debate it again. All right, what do we have next? What was it?
Bills of a previous year.
Previous years. Alex, you want to speak to this? I know we had a couple.
Yeah, these are like the bane of my existence. So, despite everyone's best efforts, I have heard of a single, what I call bad bill that has come through already. It's very likely, or at least very possible, that we see another one or two come through before we get the warrant set. So, the latest one had to do with Joe. You and I were speaking about it earlier. I forget what it was.
Don't start with the latest one had to do with Joe. You make it seem like it was my fault.
No, well, yeah, because I think it came in while you were on, out, and it was it came very end of the fiscal year, if I remember right.
Again, we gotta work with you on how you frame things. No, on July 5th.
Yes.
On July 5th,
that's right.
Somebody sent us an invoice for money that was expended in May, and it was too late on July 5th. So
Right, too late. Alex, do you know kind of a ballpark of what we've got so far for prior bills?
As of right now, less than $1,000.
Okay. So,
but you never know. There could be
outstanding
some
stuff, but
some looming giant that someone at DPW or Public Safety is. Oh yeah, I bought a $3,000 thing.
if it's not Joe's public safety, that's for sure, or public works.
Yeah, things are expensive, when you're talking about the kind of operations they have. So.
All right. Any comments from FinCom about any of that?
I love Alex.
All right, next we have approve request to utilize other town resources to reduce the cost of town hall renovation. And Alex and Joe, you guys are up on this one.
Yeah, so at one of the last, not this meeting, I think it was the last two meetings that you had in June, we had shared a spreadsheet with you, and I think Alex has since shared that with the FinCom as well, that showed what we have in available funds that could be borrowed from to help defray the costs if you decide to move forward with the town hall project this fall. There's stabilization fund, the general stabilization fund money, capital stabilization fund money, ARPA funds, and free cash, which is the big topic of discussion tonight. So any combination of some money from those things could defray the costs. We have, through Tim, have worked with the architects to get a new estimate on what that project, we'll be sharing that with you at the next meeting. It didn't come in time to make it here. I did send it to the board today, but we can't really highlight a discussion about it or have any votes on it. Cost has gone up already, so no surprise there.
To not reveal anything because we don't have it fully baked yet, but it looks like the increase, which they say the other resources that we could find would reduce it down to the current cost. So the cost wouldn't go up per se, but would be putting more money at it in a different angle because of the increase. And as Bill and I have discussed a little bit before he left and previously, construction costs have been up like 26% on average, I think is so if you give a ballpark, if we're at a $9 million town hall, you add 26% onto that, you can guess.
So is this an open-ended proposition, approve request to utilize other town sources? Or would there have to be a second subsequent article specifying the source and the amount?
Yeah, the plan would be to have a specific request to take X amount of funds from this fund or that fund or a combination, and we would lay it out in the ballot language, or not rather the ballot language, the warrant, the article language. That's what we'll try to have the select board consider at the next meeting, because their plan is to close the warrant. So we'll have that, the select board will have that fuller discussion. If they're gonna move forward with the town hall, how much do you wanna take from which funds, so that you can get that request on the debt exclusion down. And then what would the debt exclusion be, because that also has to be approved on August 1st in order to make it onto the ballot for November.
So the broader question is, what's the plan for town
Right.
hall?
That's the $1 million question.
Okay,
literally.
so like total cost,
The $8 million
it's now how much? Okay, how's it gonna be funded? Boom, boom, boom.
Right, so
We have no idea, so we really can't express it.
Right, no, I agree with it. So, I mean, we've got kind of, at this point, we've got a placeholder that we don't know if we'll continue to have it on the warrant based on whatever discussion the select board has at the upcoming meeting about funding and how we move forward, right? If we decide to ice the town hall for a year, 2 years, 10 years, the discussion will change there. But if we decide to forge ahead, we'll have to think more about how we're gonna fund it out of different stabilization funds and whatnot.
If I can have, when the select board started talking about whether or not to bring the town hall question back in the fall, it was over the winter. Two things hadn't happened at that point. The school department hadn't been approved to move forward in the MSBA project, and Gordon Conwell had not announced that they were planning to sell their campus. So those are two very large things that just create a lot of questions and uncertainty and doubt, and questions we have not had time to answer yet. So it's hard for us to respond to that
Right, but
now.
I mean, there's also a plan to move everyone out of town hall and spend money on another facility. So that's part of the plan. So am I misremembering, Christina? We were trying to catch up to all these conversations. That's kind of why we wanted to talk about, like, what's the plan for town hall?
Yeah, but I think I'm hearing that we have to wait until they have their next meeting.
Oh, yeah.
And then we'll find out.
I'm just trying to put these up on the table, like.
No, right, no, and we've signed a lease at Pilgrim Hall, right? The plan, it has been to move people there because we can't have people on the second floor, but now, things are kind of continuing to evolve, so we have to have a really robust discussion about what we're gonna do and stick with the plan here.
Yeah, I think that's
try to
what
figure it out.
we were hoping as well, yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
All right, so the next one up is approve extension of CPC funds, which we covered in earlier joint meeting. And then approve amendments to Hamilton Conservation Bylaw. I don't know where the status of this is, Tom, if you might be able to update us on any of that.
Yeah, so they have a draft bylaw. It's actually posted on the Conservation Commission website now. So they're just in the process of getting feedback from the public. They're holding public hearings. So the last couple of meetings, they've had public hearings discussing it, but I think they're hoping to finalize that pretty shortly and get an opinion from town council. Ultimately, I think bring it to us for our feedback as well. But right now, they're still in sort of the feedback gathering phase from public.
Does it look like they're gonna have time to get it fit to print, kind of a thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there compared to what the current bylaw is versus what they're proposing. So I think, I think they have maybe 1 to 2 pages in their current bylaw, and I think the draft bylaw as it stands now is 18 or 19 pages, so it's pretty significant. So there's a lot of meat there that needs to get through. But I mean, I know they are anticipating that it would go for October. I think it's just a matter of when they can finalize their edits and get it before us, and I think getting town council's eyes on it to make sure it meets all their needs there.
Right.
I believe town council is working with them on it, so.
Okay.
John, were you gonna say something?
I was going to say, based on sort of past, this just seems really aggressive.
I'm with you.
Because the number one, this thing it's got to be fully baked with enough time for people who are advising on it to advise on it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, I mean, we're middle of July right now, and you need this thing fully baked by, really early September.
Yeah.
As we start printing warrants. So, anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah. I have similar 2 cents. We got 4 cents together. All right. Any other comments on the conservation bylaw?
Does the full 19 pages have to be printed as an appendix in the warrant?
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
That will be a little cost.
The cost.
Yeah. Approve use of funds for fuel facility. So, Joe, you want to speak to this one?
So this is really there just because it's tied into whatever's going to happen here at Town Hall partially. The Capcom had not prioritized this over the winter, and they had asked us to reach out to Wenham to see if Wenham would want to talk about building a new fuel facility together. They have an antiquated above-ground tank. We have an antiquated, currently not in service, underground tank. But Wenham demurred. They said, no, thank you. And since have, through their new DPW director, asked us what our plan is to stop using their facility, which they're not kicking us out, but they're asking us to make a plan to leave. So that raises the question of what do we need to do, and is it more of a priority now? It's a big nut. It's a lot more money than we had initially thought it was going to be. With the school project, with questions are still up in the air around Town Hall, I have trouble prioritizing it over Town Hall, and I know it's not going to get prioritized over the schools. Right. So we run out of funds real quick, and I don't think it's something that's going to get a lot of support if you put it as a debt exclusion, much less do you want to keep doing that. This is here. I think it needs to be something that we have to start to make a plan to address, but I don't know that it's something that you'll want to address this year. But it is there to be discussed. If you're going to go forward with a town hall project, I would say that maybe we try to tie it into the town hall project, because we'd be doing site work and everything all at the same time. That would make if you were going to ask for money, that would make the most sense to do it at that time.
Practice anyway, yeah.
Tim has done a phased approach. I wasn't really going to ask you to speak again, but Tim has looked at phasing it to try to spread the cost out. There's a canopy that would be associated with it that we could put off and not build right away, but we could build the tanks and the pumps. Thank you. That was a word that was escaping me. We could build those and have it built so that the canopy could be added at a later date. But we do have an option to spend some money and recommission the current underground tank. It will come with an annual operating cost, in that in order to have an underground tank, we have to have someone come in on the weekends to monitor and manage it. So
It's about, what, 20K a year? or
Was
something?
running a 20K a year with the previous person that did it. He's retired. We'd have to get the new person up to speed and plan a cost for that. So it may be, it will be at least $20,000 a year.
What's the total nut for the whole project? It was 750.
I think it's just around that price, I think, yeah. I was able to look at possibly leveraging a federal contract, GSA contract. It's more of a design build, so we take away quite a bit of the engineering and construction administration piece. The two phases that Joe's talking about, phase one would be building all the site work and then utilizing a temporary fuel tank above ground to get us back in operation. And then the second phase would be then the canopy and then the full-size fuel tanks, et cetera.
Yeah.
We do have about 250,000, about 235,000 maybe left on the books from a previous appropriation. I think the temporary facility was just over that. I think it was close to around 300,000 total. Joe mentioned earlier, with the underground storage tanks, we need to carry insurance. Right now, we do not have insurance on it just because the tank is inert. We were able to get one carrier. The price is probably almost quadrupled just because of the age of the tanks. It's close to around $20,000 for insurance for the year, as well as our mechanic would have to come in weekly or daily on the weekends. That's an 8-hour minimum, and it's around 20-some-odd thousand for his just overtime cost. For fuel reconciliation and reporting for DEP requirements.
Right, and plus, kind of sidebar, we've looked at a couple of times having like kind of corporate card access to Cumbies or another gas station in town, and it just, with the size of our trucks and the hours that they have, it just isn't a feasible thing for us. And the nearest place that's like a 24-hour would be Beverly, and to have our guys drive to Beverly all the time, it just wouldn't work out.
Yeah, and Wenham, Joe mentioned earlier, Wenham is not by any means telling us to leave. I have a good rapport with the director over there. He said, he understands that we're looking at this and it's a large cost. He said, make sure, you guys, just keep me posted, he said. So, we can use it. We have the fuel. It is generator power. So if there is no fuel or no power in Wenham, we can use it. Our fuel facility is also generator power. It's the only facility in Hamilton to get fuel during a power outage. So when we're usually in.
So whatever the board decides to do with town hall and this question at the next meeting, we'll respond and we'll make the appropriate moves necessary to.
Right, and I would assume FinCom has plenty of comments, but probably just confusion at this point about what the select board is going to choose to do. And then once we do decide, then I'm sure you'll have some comments on funding and what direction that we go in. So unless FinCom wants to chime in now about anything, you're more than welcome to.
I think that's a fair summary.
Yeah. All right, up next we have approve use of funds to complete the retrofit of leased property for temporary town hall. And so we've signed a lease with GCTS for Pilgrim Hall, 3-year lease at the moment. But of course, as we've mentioned earlier in our conversations, that we'll be having some more robust conversations about how we approach that property. Joe, do you want to?
Yeah, so originally the plan was to use GCTS when the town hall project got approved, and there was funding baked into that formula to outfit the building. Obviously, that doesn't exist. We don't have money. We have about, what, Tim, about $150,000 that we could use towards that left, but we could, maybe a little less. But, again, costs have gone up, and we had an estimate done on what it will take to make the building usable for a temporary period of time. It's about $450,000, so $300,000 more than we currently have. So we need to ask for that to get the building ready for us. And not having that, it would be very difficult to move us over there. So
right.
We do have a grant from the state to wire the building, which is great. We can connect it with our fiber, but That doesn't, you know, that's for internet and, you know, network use. That doesn't really necessarily make the building usable right away. So depending if you go forward with the project for the fall or not, we can move forward with some kind of a request to make sure we can move into the building. If you don't go forward with the building for the fall, then we probably going to be talking to GCTS about not exercising the lease.
Joe, what kind of work has to be done?
So there's some interior spaces need to be changed around. We need to upgrade the wiring in the building to make sure it can support all of our electrical needs, just the way we have to do in this building. We'd have to, we do have money to cover the fiber, as I said, but the biggest thing is plumbing. The building doesn't currently have restrooms that are appropriate in size and scale. If you can imagine, that building used to be used as a childcare, so
there's some really low toilets in there, we'll say.
There are some things that are
Small toilets.
not handicapped accessible, and we wouldn't be able to move our folks or make it a public building if we didn't. I think better than half, Tim, of the $458,000 cost estimate is based on upgrading those bathrooms. I think it's about $250,000 just to the bathrooms.
So we're talking about spending $400,000 to upgrade a building. What would be an alternate lease? A different building versus the $450,000. I know you're getting it for zero.
Yeah, we haven't investigated that. I mean, we had been offered the building for, that was the direction the town had chosen to go in. So we had renegotiated the $1 lease. The available office space in town as an option, next door has been filled now, so that's no longer an option. There may be some room in the building on Willow Street that we can investigate.
There's nothing else.
That's it.
I'm just thinking about
Not much. I mean,
you're going to spend,
yeah.
and you could be out, and that you could be out of that building in 2 years, right?
If the town hall project goes forward and we build, we could be, yeah.
Gone.
But Gordon, they can pull out at any time. They can pull out in 9 months if
Right.
they sell the space.
We could have an issue that somebody else acquires the property.
Oh, yeah.
And we have a lease and they break the lease and then we're in litigation. There, you know, anything could happen. Or the new owner, if it happens, could say, stay as long as you want, or do you want to buy it? We just don't know. That's the issue.
Yeah.
Part of the issue, anyway.
Gordon Conwell has said that they would sell us Pilgrim Hall as well. So we did have our architects take a look at a rough estimate, just based on square footage of what it would cost to renovate the building for permanent.
How many people are you talking about?
22 or 24 people from this building. So our finance office, our treasurer's office, I mean, all of our finance offices are.
10 people in Patton?
But
We're going to have to make a sizable investment in that building then as well, and I don't think that we spent a bunch of money. Has 3 years elapsed since we spent money there? Because we don't want to trip ADA accessibility in that building.
Mechanism there for that. But no, I know what you're saying. You're kind of spitballing some options, but.
Cancel, incubate, and just put 10 people there.
It's like the Leahy space is still available at Willowdale.
I don't know. I'm just throwing out ideas. I'm just thinking now, spending.
Peter's building there.
Oh, yeah, I'm not real happy about it.
Yeah,
so.
I'm with you.
Peter's building's another option. Peter Godot, Willowdale, right at the end of my street,
Okay.
Willow Street.
And they have that whole complex in the back. with
All the doctor's
parking.
offices and stuff, and there's plenty of parking there. It's downtown.
Look at that.
When we did the town hall project, did we tell the town that we're gonna have to move people out of the building?
Yes.
Yes.
It'd be a cost.
Yeah.
Correct.
So that's not new news.
No.
Not new news, no. That was one of the kind of
Yeah,
campaign things we had, that is not compliant with so many codes.
right.
That we really needed to move people out if we didn't get it passed.
it's not just the people, correct? It's the integrity of maintaining records and.
Yep.
Right, right. It's not just the employees or the town people. It's everything. It's a lot of issues. All right.
Well, I mean, if you're gonna put $400,000 into a building, why don't you do one that we own and put the money into Patton and upgrade the
That's
thing?
reasonable.
That's the debate.
That's your town hall.
Or this building.
Or this building. Or town hall.
I don't know. I mean, I'm just trying to connect a couple
No,
dots.
yeah, no,
I know, and I think, and John, to your kind of, your lane here that you're going in, we have issues too with deferred maintenance on this building that we've kind of been
Oh, yeah.
doing because we've been hoping on this renovation, and
I know.
and we're gonna hit a threshold if we do something to the patent and/or town hall, that we hit that threshold where we have to do a complete update. So I think we're almost at that, with just the maintenance on this building will be right at that threshold or above it.
It's like interesting.
So, it's like we're trying to be really careful to fix stuff, but not fix too much stuff that it triggers that whole
Got it.
thing.
Yeah, I think even the $400,000 into patent would trip the ADA
Yeah.
requirements.
At patent.
Right. And for folks at home, if you
And I-
are
and I don't-
listening, that it
and I don't
means
think
basically,
That
if we hit
building's
a certain
septic system would
threshold.
be sufficient to handle the usage from town hall business.
Right.
Yeah,
And once we
I
hit
know.
that certain threshold of money spent on it, we have to spend all the money on it to bring it up to code.
Right.
So
Oh, yeah.
sprinklers, ADA, the whole thing.
Yeah.
I just love the $400,000 bathroom soundbite.
No, it's tough. And so I've been out there. Jamie, you haven't been out to Pilgrim Hall, have you? And Tom, you haven't?
I may not.
So I would strongly recommend that you go out there, set up a meeting with Joe to go out and do a little facilities tour.
We can set that up before the next meeting.
And
And members of FinCom, if you want to go, let me know, and
yeah,
we'll set
I
up a tour.
really think it's worth going out there and
Yeah.
looking at it. I will say, if the facility was updated and nice, it's a really great building and a good spot for it. But
it's not our building.
it's not our building. We have the option to buy it, as Joe said, but that's negotiations and money and et cetera. So we got to talk about that too, so.
Yeah.
All right, where were we here? Approve possible zoning bylaw amendments.
There are none, you can remove this.
What's that?
There will be none.
I didn't think so, okay.
Yeah.
Well done. All right, good night, everybody.
No, there was the one other thing. The,
What was the other one that you added?
Hey,
that-
but
Oh, yeah, wage
compensation.
and compensation.
Wage and
but
compensation.
Tables, yes, have to be updated, so.
Right, so that one's a given, and I don't want to say housekeeping, but it's just, we have to do it because we've negotiated those contracts, so that one will be added to that. All right, up next with our joint meeting agenda, we've covered STM articles just now, discussed proposed debt exclusion, ballot questions. I think we've covered that for the most part. Is there anything that we missed on that? Any other ones? There's the school and the possible town hall.
Yeah.
We discussed some town hall improvements and options. Discussion of recommended financial policies and status of new budget document. So Alex, you're still hanging with us. You want to talk to this one?
This is sorry, we moved on.
That's right, financial policies and new budget document. We talked about it a little bit briefly today, but you want to bring people up to speed.
Sure. So do we want to start with budget or policies, I guess?
Your call.
Let's start with budget. So progress on this has been slow going, slower than I had hoped. I have chunks of this document done. It's sort of, if you conceptualize it, you can think of them like sort of chapters where there are different sort of chunks of information, right? And so I have a lot of the pieces together. I don't have all of it. It's definitely not organized and ready, in sort of any sort of a format that's ready to be printed or anything like that. So for me, the limiting factor is time, and the day-to-day operations of the finance office and the finance department, and then sort of all the other projects that we have going on really suck up a lot of my time. And I'd hoped to be further along. I had really hoped to have this done by when we turned over, the fiscal year in the beginning of July, but just not there yet. So this remains a work in progress. Hopefully we'll get it done in the next couple of months. Joe and I met this morning to sort of talk about a pathway to get it done. It's a really busy time of year in finance right now with getting, getting the books closed for FY22, getting our audit off the ground, and then getting that completed. During that time, we hope to get our Schedule A and our balance sheet all completed. So there's just a lot going on. I will continue to work on this as I'm able to. It's a high priority for me. It's tough with myself and Diane, you know, and the other sort of finance offices, but, you know, mostly it's Diane and I doing all of this stuff. So it's just a big challenge, you know.
So, Alex,
yes.
I would think, and you know, baby steps. You know, don't try to get the whole thing done. I would just, you know, try to cut it up into small pieces and don't beat yourself up. Getting to policies and getting them written and is a big deal. But as long, as long as you feel as though you're making progress, I think that's.
It is. It's nice to have progress. It would have been nice to have sort of like maybe an incremental version to stand on for this year. The way that I kind of like designed this process was sort of to kind of decentralize it and farm out a lot of stuff to the department heads. And so they've produced a lot of the content, but now it's sort of putting it all together and getting it into a single voice, into an acceptable format. And so that's, it's just a big lift. And so, so that's coming. The financial policies piece is different. If we shift gears towards that, a lot of these policies were sort of, in a sense, conceptualized through the DLS, through a community compact program a few years ago. And then, so they have sort of these blanket policies that you can apply to your local organization. And so last year we did an exercise where we sort of like ranked, you know, the select board, the FinCom, and myself ranked and prioritized policies that we hope to get implemented over the next year. So this was then sort of the fall of last year. And so, you know, this is something that, you know, it's a challenge to implement because you need to really look at sort of how things are done now and then sort of how you're going to overlay this new process. And changing people's behavior is difficult because, you know, oftentimes people say, well, it works now, why do I have to change this? And so, you know, we're trying to implement sort of what we'll call new best practices and, you know, add sort of maybe a little extra security here and there through these policies. And so, you know, it's a matter of getting them really implemented in the key sort of departments where they need to go. And so they sort of vary depending on what policy we're looking at. And so, you know, again, Joe and I were talking this morning about sort of a path, you know, maybe biting off maybe 2 or 3 policies to get implemented in place by the end of this calendar year. And I think that's maybe a reasonable thing to do. You know, we can look over the next month at, you know, sort of conceptualize the groups and teams that need to be involved and then put together working groups for each different policy on how to get them sort of implemented. So that's kind of the path that we're on right now. There's some, you know, they vary in how difficult they are to implement. So like, for example, there's like an anti-fraud policy, which would, you know, would apply to every single public employee for the town. And so that's not very difficult to implement. You know, it just really is a matter of getting everyone sort of informed on sort of like what this policy is, and then having a mechanism to make sure everyone, you know, feels like they're educated and they know sort of what our rules are. And so, but then there's some that are, you know, more difficult, like grants management, for example. Like, you know, it may take, you know, extra staff. And so that it's a challenge to just sort of implement something like that without, you know, different sort of maybe looking at how our resources, like our staffing resources, sit right now, if we need to bring on additional staff, et cetera. So it's something that we are focused on when time allows, I guess.
I would do one at a time. I would not try.
Yeah, I don't have the time, you know, I try.
Yeah, I think our goal is to try to do 2, maybe 3 before December. That doesn't mean we do 2 and bring them up for final review and voting in December. We'll try to get 1 done and then do another one, and the goal is to try to get 2 to address this in the remainder of this calendar year. And with the budget, the biggest, you know, motivator for us is that when we start the budget process for next year, we want to have a template of what the new what the budget document will look like going forward. So we need to use this year's budget that was utilized and put it into the new format, into the new document, so that we can have it ready to initiate the budget process in October, November. So goal will be to get that done then, and work on the policies as Alex said, when we have time between now and December, so.
Makes sense.
Any other comments?
One thought question for me is, with the new budget approach, just making sure we remember that out of last year's budget process, we want to start early and make sure we're in sync with the schools. So just making sure we stick to that time.
Thanks, Harry. That's the goal, that we always have, and hopefully we get there. It's getting Alex the support he needs and Diane to get to that point. Hopefully we'll get there and be able to be in step with them.
Yeah, we're gonna move things up probably about a month or 6 weeks on our calendar this year to try to match steps with them. Again, there's an awful lot going on, but that's the intent, is to get that in sync with them so they don't get out sort of ahead of us, and it's more of a collaboration than a reaction, I guess.
All right. Anything else on that one? All right. Next up, we have discussion of premium pay proposal.
Yeah, so this was at the end of last year. Tom and Caroline were not on the board at the time. The FinCom and had asked us to look at premium pay because it was allowed under ARPA. The town staff worked pretty hard, particularly Alex, on a proposal to offer premium pay to town staff that were impacted working during the pandemic crisis response. Brought it forward, and it was basically tabled to have more discussion. So I think the FinCom and the town staff would like to know what what direction you want us to go in with this. There have been some things that have clarified since then. The final rule on ARPA has kind of given some more guidelines on how premium pay can be done and what the limits are. So I think the FinCom's request at the time was to make sure that kind of everybody that worked got something. There are some people that would not be eligible to get a premium pay because of how much money they make. So that's a good thing. We can reduce what we were looking at, but we just want to know whether it's worth going through the exercise of bringing it back or not. So we have had one of the unions request premium pay since then.
Say that again. What was that?
One of the unions has requested premium pay, has called out, has sent a letter to the town, to me, asking for the town to make a premium payment to their members.
And can you briefly recap the source of the funding?
It's ARPA, so the American Rescue Plan Act. The federal government was very explicit in that they wanted to find a way to compensate or reward employees of public entities that worked during the pandemic and in the most dangerous circumstances. So they carved out that a portion of your ARPA funds can be used to make additional payments to employees that worked during that time. Interestingly enough, around here, there haven't been a lot of towns that have adopted premium payments. Topsfield did it. Every employee over there got something. That was before ARPA came out and said some people couldn't get it. But other than Topsfield, I don't know anybody that's gone all the way through exercising. There are some towns now who, because of requests from their unions, particularly in the public safety realm, have started to look at it a little bit more, but nobody's really pulled the trigger yet.
And so the ARPA funds are funds that have been made available to the town or would be made available to the town that are available for certain limited expenditures.
Well,
and one of them would be.
Yeah, so that was originally the case. Now, the final rule on ARPA said that at towns that got less than $10 million in ARPA funding could essentially use it. They'd be given credit that just counted as lost revenue, that because of the pandemic you lost revenue, so you just get to use that money however you want for anything that government could normally spend money on. So it was simplified, and it opens up the possibilities for what we can do with the ARPA funds. At the outset, we were looking at very narrow scope of things that we could use it on. For instance, in December, I couldn't have proposed using any ARPA funds to help with the town hall project, but we could now if you wanted to. But even when it was more narrowly defined, premium payments to employees, municipal employees, was called out in the ARPA language. was something that the law sought to do.
So there are no legal impediments.
There's no legal impediments to it. There are some restrictions. There are no legal impediments to it, so.
So I think FinCom is, I believe, supportive still of the proposition within whatever limits, Joe, there are at the moment.
Yeah, I'm still supportive. I'm curious as to what the select board is interested in doing.
Jamie, before you, I think you have a comment, but Alex or Joe, can you refresh me on, we had kind of a ballpark figure at one point. Do you remember what it?
Yeah, it was, Alex, you probably.
It was, I think it was around $148,000.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. It was
Yeah,
140,
yeah, it was,
180 or something. I couldn't remember what it was.
So,
Yeah, yeah.
So they're
scheduled out.
Yeah,
Yeah, there was a
scheduled out. It
different
was
scale.
It was different
depending-
scales for, and we could refine that, and we could hit a target if the board, the FinCom want to
Yeah,
give us.
we had discussed, I think
If the board wants to give us a target of what you want to hit, we can refine that out. There are some people, obviously, like I said, that are not going to be allowed to get it, because if you make over a certain amount of money a year, you're not allowed to get a premium payment. So, you know, I'm not going to get one. Alex isn't going to get one. There are probably a couple of others. So, but we can refine that down. If you want us to work with a target, we can do that.
Right, I just want to remember the ballpark so folks that didn't know it, know what it kind of was. Jamie?
I'd like to point out that our our biweekly payroll is around $240,000 every 2 weeks also, to give you kind of like a measuring stick on sort of what goes out the door every 2 weeks in town.
Gotcha, that's a good kind
That
of
is good.
knowledge to have. Jamie, did you have a comment?
I was just mostly going to ask Joe or you, because I thought, I mean, it had been discussed, it had come as a proposal, and I thought it was sort of generally positively viewed, and then for at least a brief moment, there was, oh no, we can't do that, and then somehow, and it was like, and
I don't remember.
Anyway.
I don't remember it being a we can't do that. I remember that if I recall, and some, again, like David, I'm getting older. My brain doesn't always recollect everything the way I want it to. But if I recall the meetings in December, the principal holdup was that the board had agreed to spend quite a significant amount of money up front really quickly on some water projects. Most importantly, we had put basically $1 million towards the pre-treatment plant, and we were authorizing some money for the valve at Asbury Grove, and that was going to take a big chunk out of what we had, basically cut our ARPA money into less than half. And so the board's feeling at the time, raised by not either of you, but other members at the time, was to let's put a pause on approving anything else right now, and like kind of catch our breath. We don't need to spend $2 million just because we have it, and so it all got paused.
My recollection is similar. I remember we talked about it. It seemed like we had favorable, but some other members of the board felt they wanted to wait till some other things kind of came to fruition or got paid for, because they wanted to kind of hold some of that ARPA money for possible other sources. Or, as Joe said, since we could put an over/under kind of mark on that money, let's say 150,000 was the number at the time. They wanted to make sure that if we only had $100,000, that's what we would spend on it. Or we would decide if we spent more money on COVID relief stuff or vaccination clinics, that we had that money for those, and then we reduced the amount of the premium pay. And I think it just kind of fell off after that. It didn't get brought back up. So here we are. Thoughts? Tom, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be supportive of it. I mean, I think, you know, it sounds like it's, you know, we recognize what the number is. I mean, I don't think it's a outrageous number that we'd be spending, and it's supporting workers in this town that, you know, put their health on the line, were at risk, you know, and on the front lines of COVID. I think it sends a good message to this community to reward them for those services. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'd be supportive of it.
Caroline? Not enough information, okay. So, I'm pretty much in support of it. I guess I'd want to know the kind of, figure out our scale and what kind of dollar amount is, and then talk a little bit more about it. And then also, I think other added information, I think for your benefit, Tom's benefit, my benefit as well, is what we have left in that ARPA funding. Once we kind of do all of our stuff with it, and then, because I know part of that ARPA funding, we're talking about town hall stuff, and that's gonna shake out in the next meeting or so, whether we'll have more ARPA funding kind of left if we don't use it on town hall funding or try to.
I can give you an idea, kind of conceptually, what we have in ARPA, if that would help.
Yeah, that'll help.
So the town's sort of total allocation under ARPA is it was almost exactly $2.4 million, $2,406,000 and some change. So out of that, exactly 1.4 million was dedicated to the GAC pre-filtration project. So that money is gone. So now we're left with just almost exactly $1 million right now. So of that, there was initially, so I think it was $50,000 that was dedicated to public health, the public health response to the pandemic, sort of the ongoing response, with the intent to revisit that. We actually do probably need to revisit that soon. I think we're near that $50,000 mark. I'll check on that. And then I think it was $75,000 was authorized for the Asbury Grove, but that may have been a little higher. So essentially it leaves us in the like $700,000 to $800,000 neighborhood of what is currently sort of unallocated.
Okay.
To go a little further, we have until the end of 2024 to allocate the money, and then the end of 2026, so these are calendar years, end of 2026 to actually have the money expended.
So what could be helpful too, before you make your comment, Joe, is maybe for the 2 newer members and a refresher for the other 3 members on what exactly we can spend that funding on. I know it's opened up a lot more broader, but there still are some restrictions with it. So
Yeah, I mean, it essentially was opened up to any general expense, which was a major change. Initially, there were really sort of strict limitations. It was limited to sort of infrastructure, so water, sewer, drainage,
right,
broadband, public employee premium stuff, public health response. There was like a couple other ones, but there were some rigid categories. Revenue replacement was one of them. But then they came back because of all the sort of turmoil this caused at the sort of the local level. They threw a blanket rule that anyone who received less than $10 million could essentially treat it as general fund revenue.
So, and I guess that raises the kind of question/debate about other capital expenditures that we have coming up, right?
Yeah.
How we want to spend it wisely on the best things that we can.
Yeah.
So that,
It took the FinCom a couple of meetings to get comfortable with.
Yeah, no, and I
the
think
idea.
we have
So
Heather
I'm
here
with
tonight from the
Carolyn, yeah.
Capcom, so I think it's a relevant topic for the Capcom too, with some recommendations or stuff on their list that they think might be a viable thing to spend that money on. It's about 750 is what we've got left after everything's kind of out of it, I think, right? Would you say that, Alex?
Yeah, roughly.
And depending on premium pay, that could be 150,000 out of that. So 600,000 maybe, if we do the premium pay option.
Please don't lose sight of the purpose of the premium pay, as one of you mentioned, is to recognize the loyalty of employees. They are a community asset. They in effect, with your policy, run the town.
Right. No, I don't think we're debating that, David. I agree with you, though. I know that through my experience with town hall employees, your job description is not what you do. You have 10 other hats that you wear every day, depending on what's going on. So they're definitely qualified to receive it for sure. I don't think we're debating whether we do it or not at the moment. I think we're just kind of discussing it and trying to figure it out over the next couple meetings. Any other comments from anybody? Last one was close our joint meeting, I think, unless FinCom has anything else to add. Christina?
I don't think so. I think I can take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
John McGrath moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Yes. Third.
Beat you, David.
John Prulish, second. And we need to do a roll call. So I'm going to start with Harry.
Yes.
David?
Yes.
John Prulich?
Aye.
John, do you want to adjourn?
Yep.
Do you want to stay? Christina Schenk-Hargrove, aye. We are adjourned at 9:55 p.m.
All right. Thank you very much, FinCom, for joining us. We appreciate your input.
Have a good night, all.
Yeah,
You're
thanks,
welcome
everyone.
to stay
Thank you,
on if
David.
you want to.
Enjoy Spain.
Night, everyone. Thank you.
See you.
That's right, he's in Spain.
All right, up next on the Board of Selectmen agenda, we have discussion and vote on non-essential outdoor water use ban. We have our more than busy DPW director here to give us an update. Although we did joke with him today, he didn't have enough to do.
So recently, level 2 drought was declared for the state of Massachusetts. I'm not sure if you got all that correspondence or not.
About 2/3 of the state.
Yeah, about 2/3. So this is just in kind of to go along with our water conservation efforts. A few weeks ago, we had our first kind of level beyond the seasonal ban that we always have, annual seasonal ban. So this is level 2. This is just a non-essential ban. So it's a ban on all non-essential water out there, and I think there's about 5 categories that kind of livestock, agricultural, public safety. I think there's a couple others. So this is a complete ban on all outdoor water at this point. That's my recommendation, and here for approval.
Questions, comments, anybody want to make a motion? We can discuss it some more.
I move that we approve what Tim said.
The non-essential water use ban. All right. Anybody second?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion?
Does this include hand watering?
It does include hand watering, except for like a garden, vegetables, livestock. So, yes.
Any agricultural kind of use, you can still hand water.
Yeah. And I can tell you, we have had some plant shutdowns, which is a great sign that people are actually conserving water. This time of year, it's very odd that we do get that. We've had 2 over the last few days. So I think the news is getting out there, and people are helping out. So I appreciate that.
Right. And just to clarify, when Tim says the plant shut down, it's
That's
not
a good
bad
thing.
thing. It's a good thing.
That's a
It
good
means
thing.
that our pumps aren't running. We've got
Correct.
a reserve.
We
so.
are able to meet the demand as well as fill up the reservoir to shut the automatic plant down. So gives our time to wells time to rest, plant processes time to kind of recover. So that's a good thing.
I know this question came into us before when we voted on the prior water ban, but like as far as like the schools and stuff and like fields and those types of watering, are they a part of that, this ban as well?
So in the past, the schools have came to me with a request to continue watering their athletic fields for the safety of the athletes. There's a short period of time over the summer that they have. They're going to be back on the fields probably in early August. So they can't really suspend watering and then get the field back in good condition. So they've came to me over the past years, this year as well, requesting the use of their well to water their athletic fields. They've turned every other zone off on their property outside of the fields. They are watering, I think they said it's about a 12-hour time frame that they have to water. And they're doing so at the less peak times during the night, during the midnight hours. So until I'm told otherwise, they did come with me for a waiver, and I did grant them as I've done in years past.
So just so you know, I got an email from Eric Tracy today too, and he said that in addition to having shut off the other zones, they've also got some new equipment that's coming in that'll be able to adjust to the weather. So when it's going to rain, they won't have to water, and that should be installed in the next week or two. And additionally, he pointed out that it's from the well on their property, so the water that doesn't get used by the ground goes right back into their well, basically. It recharges their own aquifer right there. So they're not drawing from from anybody else around and wasting the water. They're just doing it. And it's not so much about keeping the grass green as it is about keeping the ground at the kind of the right density. I mean, if you let the ground get too dry, it gets really hard like a rock, and that becomes a safety issue for the players. So,
in addition, in the email, Eric mentioned that the new system technology they have, you can use it on your phone now. So the facilities manager can kind of real time stop, change, add stuff to it, whereas before it was more manual and a little bit more antiquated. So hopefully it should alleviate some of that issue.
How is this enforced? Is the police department driving around looking for people watering?
They do as well as we do.
In citizen reports.
Yep, in reports that we get calls, Facebook. So what I do is I send out a letter as a first offense, just because maybe somebody hasn't seen that information on the message board or on Facebook or social media. So that's kind of the initial, and that usually works. Usually they're just more unaware.
Do you look at water usage? Like if there's like a spike at a certain residence or something in the middle of a water ban? Is that?
We don't really have,
over here.
Well, just curious, and I'm not wondering. I'm just curious.
Yeah, we don't have the technology to look real time. Some towns have that. We don't. So we would get it on that quarterly read, which would be probably too late when it comes to that. But we definitely know. You can look and see.
You kind of tell when people turn on their sprinklers if you're looking at a history.
And yeah, we send them a notice and try to get them to cooperate. So.
Refresh me on the fines that we have.
I think it's, I believe it's 50
and then 100.
$50 for the first fine, $100 for the second fine.
That's what it says in the packet.
Language. I guess I should have read all of it.
And the fines would be I believe, from the police department.
Right. All right, any other discussion?
This is all day. This isn't just the after 8 thing.
All day.
All day. Yeah, all the time. All the time.
You can shower and do your dishes.
Yep.
And water your tomatoes.
Yep.
Otherwise.
Don't wash your car. Don't use your sprinkler system.
Fill up your giant pool.
Don't fill up your giant pool. No.
I would think by this time of the year, giant pools have been
Hopefully your pool is already full. If it's not, if you just built one, buy the tanker truck.
Yeah, and we have this, another. I don't see much rain in sight, so it's going to be a hot week.
Yeah.
The rain we got today might be it for a while.
Might be it for the next whatever.
Yeah.
All right, any other debate, questions? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Ayes have it. Thank you, Tim.
We already did this.
We already did the discussion and vote. Report and presentation by Patton Homestead Task Force, finally. All right, John.
Joe, do you have that?
Joe should have it, and we have Mark online. Hi, Mark. How are you?
Mark, hey, Mark.
Hello there. It's been fascinating watching your last 3 hours.
You missed sitting up here, Mark. I know it.
I've watched every minute, and I have my notes on the side to shout out and really say what a great job everybody's doing. In case you wanted to know my judgment.
We did. Absolutely.
I think while we're waiting for John McGrath to tee up the presentation. Where is he?
It's not John's fault, it's my fault.
I think it's in the other pack.
It was a separate doc.
It's
in your email.
Okay. I think that the education piece that kicked into 3 or 4 of your topics is really key. If you look at some of the close votes that we've lost over the years, for, previous town hall and other topics, it all comes down to education. And if you don't have a concerted effort to make that education, things will fail. So you really need to get some group
15th.
organized to get your messages out.
Yeah.
Forwarded it to you, Joe.
And, I think you guys tapped on that, but I just want to reinforce that because you have just enough time to get a regular campaign going.
Yeah, it's an uphill battle at times.
Yeah. And these aren't issue. These aren't easy, right? The moment the neighborhood behind Winthrop School sort of says, oh, the feasibility study means there's a chance that the property could change use,
Right.
It gets tricky.
Right.
So
There you go. What's up now?
Okay, that's good. You want to blow it up or whatever, expand it, whatever you do.
As much as I can.
Yeah, you just hit the bottom right there.
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right, I won't take up a lot of time, but
So, John, if I can just interrupt you before
go
you
ahead.
even start. Sorry. So, apologize for belaboring the length of the meeting. I think in a little background here, as many of us know, that we've got a patent homestead, basically a task force, a group together, working group that study group. We've been meeting and discussing kind of potential forward progress. And so the meeting tonight, this presentation by John, is basically talking about where we are, where we've been, and some possibilities for moving forward. I don't anticipate any real discussion tonight on options moving forward. What my thought is that this is just informational for us, and then we can either, after John gives the presentation, ask some questions, obviously, if we have them, or if we're looking for more information, kind of directing John, myself, Joe, and Tim, and the rest of the group, Alex, who's online too, and Mark, on what next things we want to know to make a decision here on where to move forward to. So,
Yeah.
John, please.
Yeah. So just to take you back to town meeting, I advanced the warrant article to provide funding, $75,000 from the general fund to fund patent homestead. In my comments, and I attached them, I did say that a study group was formed and that there were two goals. We're reviewing operations and potential of the property, and then develop options and recommendations. So that's sort of the backdrop. The first thing we went after was, this has been a 10-year life from the donation in 2012. So we reconstructed the financial history with Mark and Alex. So we'll cover off on that. So that was the first part. But the other piece I want to bring into the conversation is 3 years or so ago, the FinCom offered up a challenge and an agreement with the town and said, let's try to target self-sustaining operations in 3 years. All right. And I think that's what we've been operating under. The last 2 years happened to be fairly unusual, but there was sort of an agreement that let's try to target self-sustaining operations so the town doesn't have to continue to fund this. So I wanted to just make that note. So we want to briefly walk you through the financial history, and really what I'm after is digest some of that, and let's talk about go forward. I've sort of broken it out into sort of three options, and we can talk about that. So if you want to pop to the next slide, that's just what we put in front of the town. We actually had an appendix of a multi-year, you can't see it on the side, but multi-year P&L. And one of the things that we agreed to do, and Tim was good enough to do it, is call out what do we actually spend to maintain the grounds and maintenance. And he kind of came back with a pro forma of $45,000. That's why I stuck that at the bottom, because that wasn't on the P&L. So just keeping the grass cut, the snow plowed, the outside of the building in reasonably good shape It's a big property, and Tim, you cut all the grass. That one item alone is $45,000. So it's his team up there multiple times. So anyway, we just added that to the P and L that is in the, that's in the warrant. So that's just a minor point, but that number's sort of stuck in my head. Like, you gotta keep the place reasonably good shape. So if you go to the next page, I'll actually, can you hide that? Because, or can you go to presentation mode down the bottom right, that little presentation? Maybe that banner will get hidden because you can't see the right side of the page there.
One of those little icons.
Yeah, right there. If you hit that, it might, yeah, try that. And that might, nope,
You want to move the people?
yeah.
Yeah,
move-
just drag the people to the top
Yeah.
and they'll
Yeah.
become
Yeah, just like push them
all the
up.
way, push them all the way,
All the
and
way
they'll-
up,
they'll
hard.
transform. Yep.
There you go.
Okay. All right, so, high level, coming down the left-hand side, the gift was made in 2012. I grabbed a market value of 1.9 million. It's an estimate, that can be debated. But as soon as as soon as it was gifted to the town, we stopped receiving tax revenue. All right, that went away. All right.
Which I might add wasn't a huge amount because it was chapter lands mostly. I think it was.
It was $30,000 a year. I mean, it was 27, 28, 30.
Right.
But in the last year that we did it, it was close to 30,000. So I've looked at John's, the number that in 2012, full 2012 number, and John is basing it off of the last real tax bill.
And I'm not saying, this is not an audited financial. This is a bunch of us getting together, pulling stuff
Back of the
together.
napkin
And
kind
we
of
feel as
stuff.
though this is fairly accurate.
Yeah, but I support John's numbers. I looked at it very closely. That, you know, the subsequent 10 years of loss of is a little bit different, but he's basing it off of the right revenue that was lost when we accepted the gift.
Right.
Then, in 2014, I don't know how you did it, Mark, or how the group did it, but they basically sold a piece of the property. It's now Patton Ridge. It was $1 million. That now generates north of 150,000 in tax revenue per year. So you lost some tax revenue, but then you gained some tax revenue back. And Mark, I think you said it's actually up close to 170 a year.
Yeah, maybe 178 by the last. The assessors is rolling behind us.
Yeah.
So if things were to be valued under the current assessments and the current sale values, it would be closer to $180,000. But it's somewhere between 170 to 180 now.
The way I view that is, we got the land, we own the land. We got $1 million. Half of it we put in the fund stabilization pot. It's still there. It's now $570,000. The other $500,000 we spent to improve the property. In addition to that, CPC kicked in $300,000. So those are the key numbers. So we still own the property. We have a $150,000 annuity, tax revenue annuity, all right, that's still coming in. And we still have $570,000 in the bank that belongs to the field project. So my view is, I mean, this was a very financially positive situation for the town, because you know, we have this piece of property, and we still have $570,000 in the bank. The question then is, what's happening on a current year basis? And I think the way I can capsulize this is, to keep the property running, it's 100,000 plus a year just to keep it going. This past year, and the way I broke it down is, this year, 75K came from the general fund, and then we didn't bookkeep Tim's time, but he spent 45,000 in labor. So it's $120,000 a year. So high level, we own the property, we still have 570 in the bank, and we're spending 125 a year to keep it running. So I'll just stop there. So keep it at high level. There's detail in the back, year by year, line by line. Now, at a minimum, if we own the property, Tim's gotta go out there. You gotta maintain the property, otherwise it'll look like hell, right? And you gotta keep the building up and operating, heated. You can't let the pipes freeze. You gotta maintain it, all right? So let me just stop there. Mark, you can add some color. Joe, Alex, questions. So that's kind of where we are.
Yeah, so I would say that the bottom line here that says total cash flow of 743 sort of assumes that we've lost $300,000 of tax revenue along the way. So, maybe the total positive economic benefit is more than that. And the money coming from the general fund is mixed with the money that came out of the $500,000 from selling the land.
Yeah.
So, but long and short is 10, 12 years in, we're a little bit positive, but we are not positive on a year to year. Right? It does cost us $100,000 to $120,000 a year. And to the extent we're going to get revenue, we're not going to be getting $100,000 to $120,000 of revenue.
Right.
So the question is, what can we get at the property? What can we invest at the property? And that's sort of a future discussion. But if you, big picture, accept the fact that we haven't lost money on the property at all, we're still a little bit ahead, and maybe even a lot ahead, but we're still not at all break even on the property operations.
Right.
Because we can't sell another 4 acres and create another Patton Ridge to give us another 10 years of running, right? So that was a one-time thing. So we do have to deal head on with what the future of the property is operationally, whether it's 120 or something else costs. We can definitely generate more revenue than we're doing now, but how much more and what's the benefit? And so that's going to be part of the discussion going forward.
Right, and I'll take us sideways slightly, that when John in our group is talking about the annual cost of the town of 100+ K a year, I think part of our discussion and debate as a select board moving forward, part of it should be thinking about the financial analysis of the property, but also I'm going to call it the emotional analysis of the property. I'm going to compare it as a town asset to a park. We have Patton Park downtown. I'm sure DPW, et cetera, spends a good amount of money maintaining Patton Park as an asset as well that no one ever thinks about. I don't think we're making any money by selling $50 park use fees on Patton Park. I'm sure we're at a loss every year on Patton Park, right? So I think part of that is thinking about how we want to think about this property. Is it a town kind of emotional, maybe emotional is not the right word, a town asset like a park? Or are we trying to make it viable enough to break even, as we've said? So kind of food for thought, if that makes any sense to people.
So building on that, clearly there's a recreational use with having the trail and the water. Clearly there is the ability to have festivals. I mean, you couldn't have a festival at Patton Park without unwinding all of the baseball diamonds. There's just an infrastructure that our park at Patton Park has become recreation fields. And so there is still a value to the property that way. There's certainly the history of the property. But I think that the various uses and the history and the appreciation of Patton Homestead are hard to put numbers on, but we're going to have to put numbers on it. And eventually we're going to have to decide what is the amount that we're willing to pay for as a town, and then how much do we have to renovate or generate other revenues for it. I mean, we do have other revenue sources. We have $50,000 coming in from the federal government for veterans to use the property. We have, there is some money coming in from Incubate. There is some money coming in from Wenham Museum. So we have some small money here and there, but it's not enough to make the property break even.
So Joe, if you want to slide down to my plans for moving forward.
Yep.
Next. This is the way I thought about it. There's probably three options. One is transition the financial burden away from the town. Either sell it or assign it to a third party. So take the burden off the town. The second one is maintain it as is at an annual cost of 100 and 125. You could modify that by just reducing the expenses to buildings and grounds, and basically you don't use the building. That's the historical site town park idea. So just bare minimum, you don't let the property deteriorate, you don't threaten your property value. Or the third is execute a plan to generate material revenue stream to try to cover your cost. And Mark, I stated my opinion on, if you've been out to the house, it's nice, but it's not a revenue generator building for you. People don't want to go there, and it's not really usable. It's not going to generate real good revenue for you.
The building itself will not generate revenue. The revenue is going to come from having events and using the stable. And we finally were able to meet with the building inspector. We have a pretty clear idea now as to what he would require at a minimum if you wanted to have public events in the stables. Certainly, bathrooms, sprinklers, doors that are safe and open out, a certain amount of carpentry in some clear places. So we have, as a working group, a whole bunch of things still to run down. It won't take us, I don't think, too long to run some of those things down, at least to give us a swag idea. And then once we know what those are, we could then figure out what revenue could possibly come from the stable side. But the stables as is has moderate revenue. The stables as improved with sprinkler and bathrooms could have a lot more benefit. So that's something that the working group still has to work through over the next couple of months.
So I think that's probably the story for tonight. I mean, high level. Yeah, I think you got to consider the value to the town of the property, and then what's it worth funding on an annual basis. And you're in the $100,000 range, give or take. I mean, there's a director out there, and there's a salary there, but anyway.
Well, that's included in the 100,000.
Right.
So. And I'll mention to the point about the money for the salary out there, if we were to move to option 3, we most likely would have to increase that salary and time out there for the director. Because right now, in discussions we've had with Holly at almost every meeting we've had, she is well above her hourly stuff. She's really barely holding on to coordinating and everything like that with Incubate, plus trying to do events, etc. So we're asking a lot of her, and if we wanted more, we're going to have to pay somebody more.
Absolutely.
And keep in mind, you're competing with other venues.
Yeah, they're already more developed.
This is, I mean,
and have a history.
I'm of the opinion that even if you spent $500,000 on the barn, and say you said spend another $500,000 and upgrade it, the revenue potential, I don't think it's there, but I get it.
So keep in mind, you don't have the same return on cost. So if Patton Homestead Inc. has not been able to fundraise because we've had this item one in a different world, in a different set of words from previous selectmen, sort of saying, oh, we're going to sell the place, we're going to sell the place, we're going to sell the place. Well, that stops any of the discussions that we have with people about donating to help get funds to do any improvements. So to the extent that we can have the property with some stability as far as ongoing ownership, that would give us the ability to raise the money through grants and other means for the stables that would not be coming from general fund. Now, what that would mean is that the increase in revenue that comes from it could then flow towards the 75 to 100 to 120 a year cost without having to pay back the improvements. Right? The grants would be grants.
Right. And we did, again, the FinCom challenged the town to try to get it to self-sustaining, and we're not there.
Correct.
So I want to recognize, the FinCom predates me, but, John and David were pretty clear that, that's a commitment that we were going to try to get to, and we're not there. So I want to make sure that's on the record. I'm not saying doesn't have you guys decide. But anyway, it's an interesting.
But that pressure has been very good, right? That pressure has really helped us make sure, keep our eye on the costs and focus. So fortunately now we have the working group that will hopefully help us have a unified path going forward with the FinCom, the selectmen, and town manager can all agree we can get to a path. We're not quite there yet.
Right. So
that's
it in a nutshell.
So I'm trying to get, maybe folks can digest it all and then say, hey, let me wrap my head around Patton Homestead and decide. But I think those three options in there are probably the three or modifications. And so the question is, if you want us to think about it differently, fine. But we wanted to come back later after having explored.
Right. I think that's a good point that John brings up. I mean, we've kind of brought three options to us, the board. If there's a fourth option that you think of, by all means, let us know. And I guess look at John's presentation. If you have any questions, John or Mark are probably the two most qualified people. Joe and I and Tim and Alex are really good at other stuff too, but I would say Mark has the most history of the property. John's most into the numbers of it at the moment. So something related to that, you can ask me, and if I don't know, we can forward to those guys, however we want to work it. But I think over the next conversation is in which one of those three or an alternate direction we want to go, or some kind of a hybrid of something. And it doesn't need to be set in stone, because I think we're going to keep working towards something, and just hopefully we get some direction from this board. And we can.
John Prulidge, you still out there, and Christina, I don't know, any other FinCom thoughts? I don't know if I got the story perfectly correct, but anyway.
Oh, I think that's good. I think that's good.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, I think it, just from my perspective, it's also about certainly the emotional aspect of the property is understandable, and I think what Mark and John had said about there's an aspect of the cost where you use that sort of park analogy. I think for me personally, sort of what I struggle with is the sort of operating a business aspect of it, which I just think has a lot of hurdles for town employees to try to do. And is it the best use of resources? And I don't mean the sort of maintenance in ground one, because that's more of on the park side. So in my mind, I certainly hope an option that gets explored is there some sort of win-win where the property could still be owned by the town because of that emotional value, but then could someone else actually do the operating so that the costs that are related to operating a business on that site are moved to somebody else that is an expert in in events.
Right.
I don't know if that's feasible, but that to me is sort of.
It is certainly one of the options that we must consider.
Yeah.
That's that transition option, whether we unload the property or lease it to somebody for, like you said, some kind of commercial use.
Exactly. But that we could prevent it from getting into the wrong hands, so to speak, so we'd have some control over it.
Yep.
And just for the emotional attachment, I guess that you're speaking of, I understand that piece of it, and I especially understand it when you look at Patton Park, because everyone loves Patton Park. There's a playground, there's fields, everyone knows Patton Park, they know they can go there. I think the same with the homestead is that there is a lot there, and there's a lot of value and potential there. I don't think much of the town knows of this value or is aware of it, or know that they can go there, know that they can be a part of this. So I think there's almost like a campaign, a marketing campaign that needs to be done too, of like, here's what you can do here. It's open to the public. You can come visit the grounds, because everyone knows Patton Park, and you can justify the cost of Patton Park, or whatever maintenance you put into Patton Park, because there's always people there. It's always packed. But with the homestead, I think it's a lot different, and people aren't just as educated on it. So I think there's a campaign, a marketing campaign that at some point needs to be done about here's what's available to you.
No, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, we've had a handful of events over the years, but with the pandemic and stuff, that kind of stalled. But we've had some really well-attended events out there. The Military History Day that we've done a handful of years with the Legion and the museum is always a pretty well-attended event. We've had a couple of wintertime sledding and kite flying events out there that have been really well attended. And when everybody that kind of goes out there for the first time is always that like, wow, this is really nice and amazing out here. Or people that use the canoe launch all the time and hike across to, the different trails and stuff know about it. But like you said, not a lot of people know that they can even just go out there and park and walk around.
Exactly.
Take your dog out and walk around the
I think
property.
people know about. They're like, when they go to an event, they're like, this is beautiful, this is great. But like, just to walk to the canoe and know that they can park there, they can walk around, they can go to the canoe launch, and just knowing that, I think would make a big difference, because people would be like, doesn't need to be an event. I can just go there and see it. So
I'm curious then, like, people get very emotional about Patton Park, and I completely understand that. But I do look, like, when I look at the hard and fast numbers, I'm like, what level of activation justifies the cost?
Yeah.
Because the entire operating budget of the Council on Aging was $119,000 this year. And the level of activation for that $119,000 is a huge part of the, town.
Right.
And like, so when I look at this, and I'm not suggesting it's an apples to apples comparison, but I'm like,
How much use?
how much use and how many people are taking advantage of it? And I agree, like, there's this best case scenario where somebody comes in, but I think we have to be realistic. Like, in order for it to be activated as a true wedding venue or a true space, we would have to put $1 million into that building.
Not true, but you have to put money in.
Well, it currently has a cap of 45 people inside.
You wouldn't use it in the building. You wouldn't hold weddings in the building.
But that's a 2-season venue then. I'm just saying the cost to make it a 4-season venue, so it could generate, that kind of finance. And maybe it's not $1 million, but I think we'd have to really look at what it would cost. And so I'd put back to you guys, like.
Yeah, the best part of the whole story is Patton Ridge, because you've now generated $170,000 permanent annuity that is attributable to the gift.
Right. Yes.
So that's there. So the way I think about it is, if you know that annuity's there, as a select board, you feel comfortable spending 2/3 of that to keep the asset.
Because that's the offset or whatever, right?
That's the offset.
Yeah, I would encourage the selectmen to not spend even that much. I think that creating a plan where you're not spending, 2/3 of what you get is I think it's worth putting a more aggressive goal.
Yeah.
There.
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't think the number's 0, but I think
I'm not trying to cut anything off at the knees. I would start at the very beginning, which is like, how much is worth the level of activation we get to the town? What are those activation goals? Who takes advantage of this? And when I look at the relative spending in our town budget, this seems big to me relative to specifically the Council on Aging and ways that we spend other money where a lot more of our citizens are affected by its presence.
Yeah.
So Caroline, we have the same number of children, roughly, under 18, as we do have seniors over 65. And yet we spend $30 million a year on the schools and $119,000 on Council on Aging. So it's not exactly based on population as a distribution. And then if
As
you
it
include in the
should be.
rec
Yeah.
spending
I'm not
for
suggesting that.
all the different rec leagues and the rec.
It's what value,
I am in no way suggesting that we need to wash our hands of Patton Park. I'm just saying, when I look at the numbers, I would like us to have a conversation about, because those children are very activated at school. Those children are very activated at Patton Park. Those children are very activated at Donovan Fields. Do they need to be very activated at Patton?
I agree completely.
I don't know the answer.
Right.
So when the Council on Aging years ago, they kept talking about the population that they served, and yet when they started keeping track of the people actually coming in the door, it was a remarkable small number.
Yeah.
And then when they started having them, they located the Meals on Wheels, out of the kitchen, and so they started expanding their base. So they actually started with just a handful of people on a regular coming in on Tuesdays and Wednesday mornings. And I'd like to believe that that we meet that early threshold, but we're not anywhere near the property's potential.
anyway, food for thought.
Food for thought. Any other comments from anybody? Jamie, anything in there?
I guess, and I'm just throwing it out there, I do not expect any kind of real answer, but maybe this goes into like the fourth option or a hybrid with something, but like, would there be like an organization that like, to me, that it's the outdoor piece that's the draw there a little more than the building. I mean, if the building.
For sure.
So is there like, and I know Project Adventure was like one, was a potential to potentially be using the property, and I'm not saying them, but just some other outdoor education group that we could have some sort of partnership with or something like that.
That's one of the option 3. Let's come up with a plan and execute it. So I agree. Maybe there is a plan out there which is an outdoor based rather than an indoor based plan. So I don't know. You might be right. I mean, I know I now on my Sunday morning drives stop at Patton Homestead. I never used to go there. I actually met Joe there one Sunday morning, and he's pulling in. You guys are having a meeting. So I now go there and visit it. It's a pretty cool place.
Yeah.
But how much value is it to have John McGrath go there once a week? A lot. Not a lot.
Huge.
All right, any other comments before we move on? Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, John, for
Thank you,
sticking
John.
with us, and
Yep.
thank you, John McGrath.
Thanks.
We have a handful of items left on our. I would suggest, or make a hint,
You guys work late.
that maybe we cover our next item, and then I would be open for someone tabling the rest of the items on the agenda.
I think you're a smart man.
I think I'm a smart man.
We should look into that option.
So we have up next on our, and I would be fine if somebody wanted to table the rest of them, but I think the next one isn't that much debate or controversy. We can just check it off. So next up, we have discussion and vote to change the name of Donovan Fields on Sagamore Street to Masconomet. What is it? Masconomet Field. Yeah.
So this was,
Yeah, Joe, if you can.
it was a recommendation by, well, first of all, the board had discussed it in your kind of goal setting about in our workshop meeting on that Sunday morning that I ran into John, we had discussed the future of that location and its name and history, and did share with you that the Recreation Committee had voted to recommend that those fields be renamed, and the idea around, if the board really wanted to show, respect and reverence to the Native American history of the town, that might be a good name. It just so happens that the Recreation Committee recommended the exact same name, so.
Great minds think alike.
So moved.
Any second on that?
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to change the name of Donovan Fields on Sagamore Street to Masconomet Fields. Any further discussion?
We are 10,000% that it is accurate, and we've triple checked that it's the right everything. We're attributing to the right people, the right trust, like
Yes, so
all of that is 100%.
To give you a little background, that area there is historic in the fact that up on the hill, on the military base, is actually Masconomet's grave.
Okay.
So we're,
Not particularly at that right site, but it's
Right.
all part of the same
it's all part of the same, at one point.
land
Same-
area. and-
Same lands.
and
So I did some work for the city last year, and one thing that was interesting is that the representatives from the native tribes were very against naming things after areas where people were going to be like recreating because it was disrespectful to the land. But, so I just want to make sure that the people that made the recommendation and reviewed the recommendation, that someone other than a room full of white people has confirmed that this is the right thing to do. Not because I'm against it, I just don't want us to have not checked all the boxes.
I don't know everybody that's on the Recreation Committee, but I'm pretty sure your description accurately reflects who was in the room at the time.
Okay.
Can we defer to Mr. Knudsen, who's on the HRC, to maybe input something on his thoughts on said?
My thoughts right now?
Sure.
Yeah, I don't.
Being a middle-aged white man?
Yeah, I can give you the perspective of middle-aged white man, but I don't think that's what you want.
Right.
I mean, I try, again, I don't want anybody to think this is me saying I don't want to name the fields. I want to make sure that the change has been thoughtful. We've had the right people in the room. We're doing this, and they're not going to be like, well, cool, they named a recreational field on top of a sacred gravesite. Way to go, guys.
Not on a sacred gravesite.
Down the road.
Up the hill.
Up the hill,
Up
okay.
the hill on the property next door.
Great. I'm fully in support
So-
of the renaming. I just want to make sure the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted.
Yeah.
We could make our decision based on
The T's and I's.
the T's and I's,
Mhm.
if you want to. We could put a condition on it that we're not offending any
If the
Masconomet.
due diligence has been done, I don't want to stand in front of any trains.
Thoughts from the other folks in the room?
I mean, I agree. I think we don't want to intend to show respect, but actually do the opposite and disrespect a tribe. But I guess what are the next steps to validate that, and who takes those?
Any thoughts, Jamie?
Remember how this one was going to be easy? We're
Yeah,
just gonna
thanks
get out of
a
here?
lot.
Yeah, could have tabled it to next
That's
meeting.
okay.
Nope.
Good, you had the opportunity.
No, I'm sorry.
Blew
I'm
it.
sorry. I want to trust that the folks
No,
that
I understand
recommended
what you're
it did it, and I just.
I don't know exactly what the steps are, but I think, I don't know, I guess I would like to think that it wouldn't take that much to figure out what those
Right.
steps are.
Right.
Um,
I'm sorry, did
So-
you say you were tabling this item?
we
I can. Okay. I don't want to overthink it though.
Come on,
If y'all are
table it.
saying Caroline's overthinking this, I will pause here. I don't know the process by which the name was recommended. I don't know the council. I just want to make sure that, like, have we spoken to a single Native person in this process to ensure that we are being respectful in our naming?
I don't believe we have, but
I mean, are there active members of that tribe in this area? No, I don't think so, right?
no. If we contacted somebody, we would be contacting, I don't want to call it third party, but it would be third party person. It wouldn't be part of that. I don't think that tribe exists anymore. The
Yeah,
Masconomet
there's
was
only
part
like 2
of.
tribes in Massachusetts.
And they've blended with other ones, as we talked about during our other discussions ad nauseum.
Yep,
So,
yep.
and oftentimes,
I think so. Sorry.
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I think there's 2 questions. One is, you know, is it some sort of sacred site that we have, you know, that we have missed, right? Historically. And then, you know, secondly, just, you know, is there, like, to Caroline's point, if there's like, if there was like some you know, I don't know. If it was clear that, like, that would be really offensive to do, then yeah, we shouldn't do it.
Right.
So if no one's asked those questions until Caroline,
But surely
then
we
we should
have.
answer the questions. No, we haven't, I mean, so.
And I guess and I'm maybe reading into this, but when we first started down the road of Indigenous Peoples' Day and et cetera, and the land acknowledgement stuff, when I think we first reached out to whoever, Thomas Green, he kind of said, I don't care what you do.
There was some of that, yeah.
In fact, he declined to come back and offer advice.
Yeah.
He didn't want to offer advice.
But he didn't really, yeah. And then I think in my other knowledge of other experience with Indigenous peoples, my wife being from Hawaii, when you talk about land stuff with Native Hawaiians, they say, we don't want any conversation unless you're giving us something back. We don't want you to acknowledge that you're on our land. We want our land back. Right? And so depends on the kind of conversation or whatever. So I don't know if it would be offending. I offend people all the time, I guess, so I wouldn't be offended by naming it. But at the same time, I don't know if, to Jamie's point, is it somewhere significant? I don't believe it is. There's not been any research that it is. I think even the Masconomet grave site was a little bit controversial because it wasn't a sacred site, I think, when he was first put there. And now it is, and it's been acknowledged as that, but it isn't on the Donovan Field property. So.
Okay. So the idea is that all of this was Masconomet land. We have this one field, and we're just gonna name it Masconomet Field, just in homage generally to a group of people that at one time were here. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's the general thought, is to acknowledge that.
Will there be a land acknowledgement at the field?
I will remind you that during the workshop, we did talk about the possibility of doing, the board voted not to do a land acknowledgement, but to do an annual kind of recognition of Indigenous peoples on that day in October. And this could be a site where you could do that, because now you.
Because we had originally talked about doing something up on the Air Force?
Yeah, Air Force.
The Air Force base there, because the gravesite is there, doing something there on that property. But now this would give us another option that's more accessible.
All right, if y'all are comfortable, let us move forward.
I would make a suggestion that we move forward with it and we ask the questions. And if something is amiss, that we revisit it.
Yeah.
If people are okay with that.
So is that an amended motion?
I think Jamie amended his motion to say with questions being asked and no major controversy. Was that correct, Jamie?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a second on that motion? Okay. Any further discussion?
No.
All right, beautiful. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, the ayes have it. All right, up next on our agenda is discuss and vote on amended water abatement policy.
And Tim's still here.
What's this thing called?
I'll make a motion to table the remaining agenda items.
Oh, you don't need to make a motion, you can just table it, sir, but that's
Table it.
fine.
What?
You can just table it, you don't need to make a motion. You don't need to second it. Anybody has the right at any point to table anything, and it's tabled.
Such power.
Such power you have.
Well,
Great, ask me about the next one.
The first time, you can't table it indefinitely.
You can't table indefinitely, right. You can
This
table it
is
to
the
the next one.
Ask me about the second one.
Next, we have, oh, sorry, let me just say, we've tabled our amended water abatement policy discussion. And then we have up next, discuss and vote on Hamilton Environmental Impact Committee creation. I know Carolyn really wants to talk about this tonight.
I'd like to table it tonight, actually.
Oh, okay. We could table that tonight.
Oh, great.
And then Joe will be sad, but discuss town manager goals for 22-23.
Actually, if one of you tables it, I'll be happy because I can actually come back with some, a little bit better
I'd like
built
to
out.
table it.
I'd table it.
Yeah.
Table it. And any new business before we leave tonight?
I will table the new.
Table the new business, all right. New business has been tabled. Thank you, Jamie. And then I'm just looking for one actual motion to happen at the end of this meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, anybody
Second.
second? All right, Jamie seconds. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Mary Alice. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, anybody else. Watch on HWCam.
Thank you, everybody.